Hey friends, about 70% of folks watching my videos aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a like, leave a comment, and let me know where you're tuning in from. I bounced around for a while taking odd jobs where I could find them. Construction mostly. It was hard work, but it paid the bills and kept me moving. Eventually, I ended up in Oregon. I'd heard about the national parks there, how they were always looking for seasonal workers. Figured it was as good a place as any to lay low for a while. That's how I ended up at Crater Lake. The first time I saw it, I was stunned. I'd seen pictures, of course, but nothing could prepare you for the real thing. It was like looking into a mirror. The water so still and clear, it reflected the sky perfectly. The cliffs surrounding it were so steep it felt like they might swallow you whole if you got too close. I started out as a basic grunt, doing maintenance and cleaning up after the tourists. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a foot in the door. Over time, I worked my way up to park ranger. It was a good fit for me. I liked the solitude, the quiet. And I was good at it too. Had a knack for spotting things that were out of place, whether it was a lost hiker or a bear that had wandered too close to the campgrounds. But that was something else about Crater Lake, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, a feeling like there was something watching me from the trees. I chalked it up to nerves at first, the unease of being in a new place. But as the years went by, the feeling only grew stronger. It all came to a head in the summer of 2000. Hello friend. About 70% of those who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did. Also, don't forget to press the like button and leave your comments. Your interaction makes the content reach everyone and contributes to the growth of the channel. Thank you all. From which country or city do you follow the channel? My name is August Flynn, and I've been working in Crater Lake National Park for about 6 years now. Before that, I bounced around a few other places, but Crater Lake's got something different. Maybe it's the stillness of the water or the way the air sits heavy on your shoulders like a bad hangover. Either way, I've always been more comfortable in the woods than anywhere else. Grew up in a small town where the only things you could do were either go fishing or join the fishing industry. I chose the former. My dad had his own little operation, a couple of boats that he'd take out on weekends. He always said the sea was in our blood, that Flynn's had been fishermen for generations. I never had the heart to tell him I hated it. Or smell the seasickness, the endless hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror when a storm hit. No, give me solid ground beneath my feet, any day. So as soon as I turned 18, I packed my bags and left. Didn't even say goodbye, just left a note on the kitchen table and hopped on the first bus out of town. I've been at the park for about 3 years at that point, and I thought I'd seen just about everything there was to see. Boy, was I wrong. It started out like any other shift. I clocked in at dusk, ready for another long night of patrolling the park. My partner Chet was supposed to be with me, but he called in sick at the last minute. Probably had too much to drink the night before, as usual. I didn't mind working alone, though, preferred it even. Chet was a nice enough guy, but he had a habit of running his mouth, filling the silence with endless chatter about his latest conquests or the newest conspiracy theory he'd read about online. Me, I liked the quiet. Gave me time to think, to listen to the sounds of the forest. I started my patrol at the Rim Village, making sure all the tourists had cleared out for the night. It was a clear evening, the stars just starting to peek out from behind the clouds. The air was cool and crisp with a hint of smoke from the campfires that dotted the park. As I made my way along the rim, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A prickling at the back of my neck like someone was watching me. I scanned the trees but saw nothing. Just shadows and the occasional flicker of a firefly. I was about halfway through my patrol when I heard it, a sound coming from the woods to my left. It was faint at first, barely audible over the rustle of the wind in the trees. As I listened closer, it grew grew louder, a kind of low guttural growl, like nothing I'd ever heard before. Now, I've been in these woods a long time. I've heard just about every animal sound there is, from the howl of a wolf to the scream of a mountain lion. But this was different. It sent a chill down my spine, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I reached for my radio, ready to call it in. But something stopped me. A curiosity. A need to know what was out there. So, instead of calling for backup, I stepped off the path and into the trees. Looking back, it was a stupid move. I should have known better than to go off on my own, especially at night. But at the time, all I could think about was finding the source of that sound. I rocked for maybe 10 minutes, my flashlight bouncing off the trees as I picked my way through the undergrowth. The sound was getting closer and now louder. It seemed to be coming from a small clearing up ahead. As I stepped into the clearing, I saw it. At first I thought it was a bear. It was certainly big enough. Its shoulders hunched as it crouched over something on the ground. But as it got closer, I realized it wasn't a bear at all. I don't know what it was. It looked like a man, but not quite. Its limbs were too long. Its back arched at an unnatural angle, and its face guarded its face. It was like someone had stretched a human skull, pulling the features out until they were barely recognizable. One looked up at me as I entered the clearing, its eyes glinting in the beam of my flashlight. They were yellow with vertical slits like a cat's. It let out a low growl, its lips curling back to reveal a mouthful of jagged teeth. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I'd seen many things in these woods, but nothing like this. It was as if something from a nightmare had come to life. A creature that shouldn't exist. For a moment we just stared at each other. Then slowly it stood up. It towered over me, its arms hanging down past its knees. In one hand it held something. It took me a second to realize what it was, a human leg. The flesh torn and ragged. I don't remember reaching for my gun. One minute I was standing there frozen in fear, and the next I was aiming my pistol at the creature's head. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely keep the gun steady. "Don't move," I said, my voice sounding small and weak in the vastness of the forest. "I'm a park ranger. I'm armed." The creature tilted its head as if it was considering my words. Then, faster than I could blink, it lunged at me. I fired on instinct, the shot echoing through the trees. The creature stumbled but didn't fall. It let out a roar of pain and anger and came at me again. I turned and ran, crashing through the undergrowth as I tried to put as much distance between myself and the creature as possible. I could hear it behind me. Its footsteps were heavy and lumbering. It was gaining on me. I knew it. I just had to make it back to the path, back to civilization. But I never made it. I tripped over a root, my ankle twisting painfully as I fell to the ground. The creature was on me in an instant, its claws digging into my shoulders as it pinned me down. I struggled, but it was useless. The creature was too strong. Its grip like iron. It leaned down, its face inches from mine. I could feel its hot breath on my skin, smell the stench of rotting flesh. "Please?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Please don't." But the creature didn't listen. It opened its mouth, its teeth gleaming in the moonlight. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end. And then nothing. The weight on my chest lifted. The claws retracted. I opened my eyes to see the creature standing over me, its head cocked to one side. It made a sound, a kind of low rumbling purr. Then slowly it backed away, melting into the shadows of the trees. I lay there for a long time, my heart racing and my body aching. I knew I should get up, call for help. But I couldn't seem to make my limbs work. All I could do was stare up at the sky, watching as the stars slowly faded into the dawn. When I finally made it back to the ranger station, I told them I'd been attacked by a bear. It was the only thing I could think of, the only explanation that made sense. They sent out a search party, but they never found anything. There tracks no sign of the creature. I took a leave of absence after that, spent a few months trying to forget what I'd seen, but I couldn't stay away forever. The forest called to me like it always had, so I came back and I've been here ever since. I still patrol the woods at night, still listen for the sound of that creature in the darkness. But I've never seen it again. Sometimes I think I must have imagined it. A trick of the light, a nightmare brought to life by my own fear. But then I remember the feeling of its claws on my skin, the stench of its breath, and I know it was real. I don't know what it was or where it came from, but I do know one thing. It's still out there somewhere in the depths of the forest, waiting. And I'll be here watching, waiting for the day it comes back. I don't talk about that night much. Not because I don't want to, but because I know how it sounds. Crazy, right? A park ranger claiming he saw some kind of monster in the woods. It's the kind of story that gets you a one-way ticket to the nut house. But I know what I saw. No, I'm not the only one. There have been stories about the creature for as long as anyone can remember. The locals have a name for it, the Crater Lake Monster. They say it's been here since the beginning, since the lake was formed by the collapse of a volcano thousands of years ago. Of course, most people don't believe the stories. They think it's just a legend, a campfire tale told to scare kids into behaving. But I know better. I've done my research, you see. Spent hours in the library, poring over old newspapers and journals. Then I found things, snippets of stories that hint at the truth. There was a report from the 1920s about a group of hikers who went missing near the lake. They were never found, but one of the search party members claimed to have seen something in the photos. Something big and fast, with glowing eyes. And then there was the incident in the 1960s when 2 teenagers were found dead on the shore of the lake. The official report said they drowned, but there were rumors, whispers of something else, something that had dragged them into the water. I even found an old Native American legend about a creature that lived in the depths of the lake. They called it the Louse Pet, after the god of the underworld. According to the legend, the creature was a guardian of the lake, protector of its secrets. But the stories didn't prepare me for the reality. Nothing could have. After that first encounter, I became obsessed. I spent every waking moment thinking about the creature, trying to understand what it was and where it came from. I even started camping out in the woods, hoping to catch another glimpse of it. But it was like the creature knew I was looking for it. Every time I got close, it would vanish, leaving nothing but a trail of broken branches and the lingering stench of decay. It wasn't until a few months later that I saw it again, and this time I wasn't alone. It was a busy weekend at the park, with families and tourists flocking to the lake to enjoy the last of the summer sun. I was on patrol, keeping an eye out for any troublemakers or lost hikers. I was just about to head back to the ranger station when I heard a scream. It was coming from one of the more remote trails, a winding path that led deep into the heart of the forest. I took off running, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer, I could hear more screams mixed with a sound I'd never forget. The same low, guttural growl. I burst into a clearing to find a group of hikers huddled together, their faces pale with fear. And now standing at the edge of the clearing was the creature. It was just as I remembered it, tall and lean, with long, spindly arms and a face that was almost human, but not quite. It was crouched over something on the ground. Its back was to me. I reached for my gun, but before I could draw it, one of the hikers, a young man with a backpack, stepped forward. He was shaking, but there was a determined set to his jaw. "Hey," he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. "Get away from her." The creature turned its yellow eyes on the hiker, who let out a low growl, its lips curling back to reveal those jagged teeth. But the hiker didn't back down. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a flare gun, aiming it at the creature. I said, "What back?" He yelled, his finger tightening on the trigger. The creature hesitated, its eyes darting between the hiker and the flare gun. Then, with a final snarl, it turned and bounded off into the trees, disappearing from view. I rushed over to the hikers, my heart hammering in my chest. One of them, a young woman, was lying on the ground, her leg bent at an unnatural angle. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling down beside her. "It came out of nowhere," the hiker with the flare gun said, his voice shaking. Grabbed her, started dragging her into the woods. I thought it was gonna kill her. I nodded, my mind racing. I thought I should call for backup, get the woman to a hospital, but a part of me couldn't let this opportunity pass by. I had to know more, had to find out what this creature was and why it was here. So I made a decision, one that would change everything. "Listen to me," I said, looking each of the hikers in the eye. "I need you to promise me something. Don't tell anyone what you saw here. Not the rangers, not the police, not anyone." They looked at me like I was crazy, and maybe I was. But I couldn't risk this getting out. Couldn't risk the creature being hunted down and killed before I had a chance to understand it. "Please," I said, my voice urgent. "I know it sounds insane, but I need you to trust me. I'll take care of this, I promise." The hikers exchanged glances, but finally they nodded. I helped the woman to her feet, supporting her weight as we made our way back to the trailhead. When we got there, I called for a medevac and watched as the helicopter carried the woman away to safety. The other hikers left soon after, their faces still pale with shock. Then me, I went back into the woods, back to the clearing where I'd seen the creature. I had to know more, I had to find out what it wanted and why it was here. But as I searched the area, I found nothing. No tracks, no sign of the creature. It was like it had vanished into thin air. I stayed out there for hours until the sun began to set and the shadows grew long. And as I made my way back to the ranger station, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was out there in the darkness waiting for me, that I wasn't afraid anymore. I was determined. I would find the truth, no matter what it took. And if that meant facing the creature again, so be it. I was ready for whatever came next. I talked to the locals, those who lived in the area for generations. They were hesitant at first, unwilling to share their secrets with an outsider. But eventually they started to open up. They told me stories, legends that had been passed down from father to son, mother to daughter. Stories of a creature that had lived in the woods for as long as anyone could remember. A creature that was neither human nor animal, but something in between. Some called it a spirit, a guardian of the forest. Others said it was a demon, a creature of pure evil that preyed on the innocent and the unwary. But all agreed on one thing: the creature was not to be trifled with. The more I heard, the more I became convinced that the creature was real, that it was something more than just a legend. And the more I became determined to find it, to uncover the truth behind its existence. But the locals warned me against it. They said that those who went looking for the creature rarely came back, that the forest had a way of swallowing people whole, erasing them from existence as if they'd never been. Hey, listen, I can't. The creature had gotten under my skin and become an obsession that I couldn't shake. I had to know more. I had to see it again with my own eyes. So I started spending more and more time in the woods, camping out for days at a time in the hopes of catching a glimpse of the creature. I told the other rangers I was doing research, studying the local wildlife. But the truth was, I was hunting. I set up cameras, laid traps, and did everything I could think of to try to lure the creature out into the open. But it was like it knew what I was doing, like it could sense my presence and was staying just out of reach. Weeks turned into months, and still I had nothing to show for my efforts. The other rangers started to whisper about me, wondering if I was losing my mind. And maybe I was. Maybe the creature had driven me to the brink of madness, consuming me in a way that I couldn't understand. I couldn't give up. I wouldn't. I had to see this through, had to find the answers I was looking for. And then one night, everything changed. I was camped out in a remote part of a forest, far from the tourist trails and the ranger station. I'd been there for days, living off trail mix and bottled water, sleeping in a small tent that barely kept out the cold. I was just about to turn in for the night when I heard it, a sound coming from somewhere deep in the woods. It was faint at first, barely audible over the rustle of the wind in the trees. But as I listened closer, it grew louder, more distinct. It was a voice, a human voice, crying out in the darkness, and it was coming from the direction of the creature's lair. I grabbed my flashlight and gun, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I should call for backup, wait for the other rangers to arrive, but there was no time. Whoever was out there, they were in trouble, and I was the only one who could help them. I plunged into the woods, following the sound of the voice. It was hard going, the undergrowth thick and tangled, the ground uneven beneath my feet. But I pushed on, driven by a sense of urgency that I couldn't explain. As I got closer, I could hear the voice more clearly. It was a woman's voice, high and thin, edged with panic. She was screaming, pleading for help. And then I saw it, the creature crouched over something on the ground. And beneath it, a woman, her clothes torn and bloody, her face contorted in fear. I didn't hesitate. I raised my gun, my finger tightening on the trigger. But before I could fire, the creature turned its yellow eyes, fixing on me. It let out a roar, a sound that seemed to shake the very earth beneath my feet. And then it charged, its long arms outstretched, its jaws open wide. I fired the shot, going wide in the darkness. The creature kept coming, its eyes glowing with a feral intensity. I fired again, and this time I heard it yelp in pain, saw it stumble. But it didn't stop. It kept coming, its claws tearing at the ground, its teeth bared in a snarl. And then it was on me, its weight bearing me to the ground, its hot breath on my face. I struggled, but it was useless. The creature was too strong, its grip like iron. I felt its claws dig into my flesh. I felt the white-hot pain of its teeth sinking into my shoulder. And then suddenly it was gone. The weight lifted, the pain receded. I opened my eyes to see the woman standing over me, a bloody rock clutched in her hand. She helped me to my feet. Her eyes were wide with fear and shock. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved my life." I nodded, too stunned to speak. I looked around, searching for the creature, but it was nowhere to be seen, vanished into the darkness as if it had never been. I turned back to the woman, taking in her torn clothes and the blood that stained her skin. "What happened?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What were you doing out here?" She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "I was hiking," she said, her voice breaking. "I got lost, couldn't find my way back. And then it found me." I muttered, understanding dawning. The creature had been hunting her, stalking her through the woods. And if I hadn't arrived when I did, I pushed the thought away, focusing on the task at hand. I had to get her out of here, had to get her to safety. We made our way back to my campsite, the woman leaning heavily on my arm. When we got there, I helped her into my tent, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. And then I called it in, my voice shaking as I relayed what had happened to the other rangers. They arrived within minutes, their faces grim as they took in the scene. They tried to question the woman, trying to get her to tell them what she'd seen. But she was too traumatized, too shaken to make much sense. All she could say was that it was a monster, a creature out of a nightmare. I knew how she felt. I'd seen it too, and had felt the terror of being in its grasp. And I knew that I couldn't rest until I'd found it, until I'd put an end to its reign of terror. The other rangers warned me against it, telling me that it was too dangerous, that I was putting myself at risk. But I hadn't listened, I couldn't. The creature had become a part of me, a mystery that I had to solve. And so I went back out into the woods, back to the place where I'd seen it last. I searched for days, then weeks, but found nothing. No sign of the creature, no trace of its existence. But I knew it was still out there, somewhere in the darkness, waiting and watching. And I knew that I would never stop searching, never stop hunting until I found it. Because the truth was that the creature had changed me. It had awakened something inside of me, a darkness that I'd never known existed. And now that I'd seen it, now that I knew what was out there, I could never go back to the way things were before. I was a different person now, a man with a purpose. And that purpose was to find a creature, to uncover the truth behind its existence, no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks, and still I searched. I barely slept or ate. All I could think about was the creature, the mystery that had consumed my every waking moment. The other rangers started to avoid me, started whispering behind my back. They thought I was crazy, they thought I'd lost my mind. And maybe they were right. Maybe the creature had driven me to the brink of insanity, taking hold of my soul in a way that I couldn't understand, that I couldn't stop. I wouldn't. The creature had become my obsession, my reason for living, and I would find it no matter what it took. I started to venture deeper into the woods, into places where even the most experienced hikers feared to tread. I camped out for days at a time, living off the land, surviving on nothing but my wits and determination. And then one day I found something, a clue, a hint of the creature's existence. It was a footprint larger than any I'd ever seen, pressed into the soft earth of a riverbank. I followed the trail, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I was close, knew that the creature was somewhere nearby. And then I saw it. A cave hidden deep in the forest. Its entrance was dark and foreboding, a gaping maw that seemed to swallow the very light itself. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over my gun. I knew I should turn back, I should call for backup. But I couldn't. I had to see this through, I had to know the truth. I stepped into the cave, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air was thick and musty, the walls slick with moisture. I could hear the sound of water dripping, echoing in the stillness. And then I saw it. The creature crouched in the shadows, its yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. It was larger than I remembered, its body covered in thick matted fur, its claws as long as my forearm. It let out a low growl, its lips curling back to reveal jagged teeth, but it didn't attack. Instead, it spoke. "Why have you come here, human?" It asked, its voice a deep, guttural rumble. "What do you seek?" I stared at it, my mouth hanging open in shock. I never considered the possibility that the creature could speak, that it was anything more than a mindless beast. I want to know what you are," I stammered, my voice shaking. "Why you're here, what you want." The creature regarded me for a long moment, its eyes boring into mine. "I am the guardian of this forest," it said, its voice filling the cave. "I have been here since the dawn of time, watching over the land and its creatures." I shook my head, trying to make sense of its words. "But why attack people?" I asked, my voice growing stronger. "Why kill innocent hikers, innocent people?" The creature let out a low, rumbling laugh. "Innocent?" it asked, its voice dripping with contempt. "No human is innocent." It paused. "You come into my forest, you trample my land, you destroy everything in your path, and you call yourselves innocent." I opened my mouth to argue, but the creature cut me off. "I have seen the death and destruction that your kind brings," it said, its eyes flashing with anger. "I have watched as you cut down trees, pollute rivers, slaughter animals for sport, and you dare to call me a monster." I felt a chill run down my spine, a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. The creature's words rang true, hit me like a punch to the gut. We were the monsters, the ones who had brought destruction and chaos to this land. But not all humans are like that, I said, my voice small and weak. Some of us, we want to protect the forest to preserve it for future generations. The creature regarded me for a long moment, its eyes searching mine. "And are you one of those humans?" it asked, its voice softening. "Are you willing to give up everything to sacrifice your own life for the sake of the forest?" I hesitated, my mind racing. Was I willing to go that far to give up everything I'd ever known for the sake of this land, this creature? And then I realized that that the forest had become a part of me, had seeped into my very soul, and I would do anything, sacrifice anything to protect it. "Yes," I said, my voice strong and clear. "I am." The creature nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of its mouth. "Then perhaps there is hope for your kind after all," it said, its voice filled with a newfound respect, and with that it turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving me alone in the darkness of the cave. I stood there for a long time, my mind reeling with the implications of what had just happened. I had spoken to the creature, had learned the truth behind its existence, and I had made a promise, a vow, to protect the forest and all its creatures. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew that I would face opposition and skepticism from those who didn't understand. But I also knew that I had to try, had to do everything in my power to keep my promise. And so I left the cave, my heart filled with a new sense of purpose. I would be the guardian of the forest, the protector of the land, and I would do whatever it took to keep it safe, to preserve it for generations to come. Because in the end, that was all that mattered. The forest, the creatures that called it home, their beauty and the mystery that lay hidden within its depths, and I would be its champion, its defender, no matter the cost. I returned to the ranger station, my mind still reeling from my encounter with the creature. I knew I had to tell someone, I had to share what I had learned, but who would believe me? Who would understand? I decided to start with the other rangers, the ones who had been there the longest, who knew the forest better than anyone. I called them together, my voice shaking with excitement and trepidation. "I found it," I said, my eyes shining with newfound intensity. The creature, the one that's been attacking hikers, they stared at me. Their faces were a mix of disbelief and concern. "August, what are you talking about?" One of them asked, his voice gentle. "There's no creature, no monster in the woods. It's just a legend, a myth." I shook my head, my frustration mounting. "No, it's real," I insisted, my voice growing louder. "I saw it, spoke to it. It's not a monster, it's a guardian. It's been protecting the forest, keeping it safe from those who would destroy it." I exchanged glances, their expressions telling me all I needed to know. They thought I was crazy, thought I had lost my mind. "August, listen to yourself," another ranger said, his voice filled with concern. "You're talking about a talking creature, the guardian of the forest. That's not possible. It's not real." I felt my anger rising, my hands clenching into fists. "It is real." I snapped, my voice like a whip. "And if you don't love me, then you're part of the problem. You're the ones who are destroying the forest, who are putting innocent lives at risk." They stared at me, their mouths hanging open in shock. I had never spoken to them like this before, had never shown such anger, such intensity. "August, please," one of them said, his voice pleading. "You need help, you need to see someone. This obsession, it's not healthy. It's gonna get you killed." I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "No, I don't need help," I said, my voice like steel. "I need you to listen, to understand. The creature is real, and it's not gonna stop until the forest is safe, until we stop destroying it." They tried to reason with me, tried to make me see sense, but I was beyond reason, beyond logic. The creature had shown me the truth, had opened my eyes to the reality of what we were doing to the land, and I knew that I had to act, had to do something to stop it. I left the ranger station that day, my mind made up. I would find a way to protect the forest, to keep it safe from those who would harm it. And if that meant going against the other rangers, against the very people I had once called my friends, then so be it. I spent the next few weeks in the woods, camping out in the depths of the forest. I searched for signs of the creature, for any hint of its presence, but it was like it had vanished, like it had never existed at all. I began to doubt myself, to wonder if I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe the other rangers were right, maybe I was losing my mind. But then one night I heard it. The same low, guttural growl that I had heard that first night. The same sense of primal fear that had gripped me in its presence. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest, and there, in a small clearing, I found it, the creature, its yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. "You came back," it said, its voice a deep rumbling. "I knew you would." I nodded. My throat was tight with emotion. I made a promise. I said, my voice shaking. I said I would protect the forest, that I would do whatever it takes. The creature regarded me for a long moment, its eyes searching mine. "And what will you do, human?" it asked, its voice filled with curiosity. "How will you keep your promise?" I hesitated, my mind racing. I had no plan, no idea of how to proceed. But I knew that I had to do something, had to find a way to make a difference. "You'll start by telling people the truth." My voice growing stronger, I said, "by showing them the beauty of the forest, the importance of preserving it. And if that doesn't work, if they don't listen, then they'll find another way. They'll do whatever it takes." The creature nodded slightly, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of its mouth. "You have a strong spirit, human," it said, its voice filled with respect. "A spirit that the forest needs. But be warned, the path ahead will not be easy. There will be those who oppose you, who seek to destroy all that we hold dear." I honored my resolve hardening, and my voice steadied. "But I won't back down, I won't give up. This forest, these creatures, they're worth fighting for." The creature regarded me for a long moment, its eyes glinting in the moonlight. "Then go, human," it said, its voice barely above a whisper in the night. "Go and do what must be done. The forest is counting on you." With those words, the creature turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving me alone in the clearing. I stood there for a long time, my mind racing with the implications of what I had just heard. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that I would face challenges and obstacles at every turn. But I also knew that I had no choice. I had to see this through to the end. And so I set out, my heart filled with a newfound sense of purpose. I began to speak to anyone who would listen, sharing the story of the creature and the importance of the forest. I spoke to hikers and campers, to locals and tourists, to anyone who would give me the time of day. At first, most people dismissed me as a crackpot, a crazy old ranger who had spent too much time in the woods. But slowly, gradually, I began to get through to some of them. I showed them the beauty of the forest, the intricate web of life that existed within its borders. I spoke of the creatures that called it home, of the delicate balance that had to be maintained in order to keep it thriving. And some of them began to listen, began to see the forest through new eyes. They started to volunteer their time and resources to help me in my mission to protect and preserve the land. But there are others who opposed me, who saw the forest as nothing more than a resource to be exploited, a commodity to be bought and sold. There were the ones who sought to cut down the trees, to pollute the rivers, to destroy all that was wild and free. I knew that I had to stop them, had to find a way to convince them of the error of their ways. And so I began to take more drastic measures to put myself on the line for the sake of the forest. I organized protests and rallies. I chained myself to trees and blocked logging roads. I spoke out against the corporations and politicians who sought to profit from the destruction of the land, who saw nothing wrong with sacrificing the future for the sake of the present. And slowly, gradually, I began to make a difference. People started to take notice, started to see the importance of what I was doing. The media began to cover my story, shining a light on the plight of the forest and its creatures. But still there were those who opposed me, who sought to silence me by any means necessary. They threatened me, attacked me, and tried to discredit me at every turn. And through it all, the creature remained by my side, a constant presence in the shadows. It guided me, protected me, and gave me the strength to carry on even when all seemed lost. Then one day, the unthinkable happened. A group of loggers, backed by a powerful corporation, decided to take matters into their own hands. They entered the forest with heavy machinery, intent on cutting down the very heart of the land. I knew I had to stop them. I had to put an end to their destruction once and for all. So I stood in front of their machines, my arms outstretched, my voice raised in defiance. "No more!" I shouted, my words echoing through the trees. This forest, these creatures, are not yours to destroy. They belong to all of us, to the generations yet to come. And I won't let you take them away. The loggers jeered and threatened, their eyes filled with hatred and greed. But I stood my ground, my resolve unshakable. Then, just when all seemed lost, the creature emerged from the shadows. It stood beside me, its yellow eyes blazing with fury, its teeth bared in a snarl. The loggers fell back, their faces pale with fear. They had heard the stories, they had seen the evidence of the creature's power, and they knew that they were no match for it, for the guardian of the forest. And so they fled their machines, abandoned their plans in ruin. As they disappeared into the distance, the creature turned to me. Its voice was a whisper in my ear. "You have done well, human," it said, its tone filled with pride. "The forest owes you a great debt, one that can never be repaid. But know this, you will always have a place here, a home among the trees and the creatures of the wild." I felt tears spring to my eyes. My heart swelled with emotion. I had given everything to this land, to these creatures. And now, at last, I knew that it had all been worth it. So I stayed, my life forever entwined with the forest and its guardian. I became a legend among the locals, a strange old man who lived among the trees and spoke to the spirits of the land. I knew the truth, I knew the real story behind the myth. And I knew that I would never leave this place. I would never abandon the creatures that had become my family. So I was the guardian of the forest, now the protector of all that was wild and free. And I would continue to fight for it, to defend it against all who would seek to destroy it. Until my last breath, until the end of my days. This was my home, my purpose, and I would never let it go. Years passed, and the forest flourished under my watchful eye. The creature and I became a team, working together to protect the land and its inhabitants from those who would do them harm. We faced many challenges over the years, numerous threats to the delicate balance of the ecosystem. There were poachers who sought to hunt the animals for sport, developers who wanted to turn the forest into a tourist attraction, and even other creatures who encroached on our territory. But through it all, we remained vigilant, using our combined strengths to keep the forest safe. The creature's primal power and my human ingenuity proved to be a formidable combination, and we became a force to be reckoned with. As time went by, I began to realize that my role as the guardian of the forest was not just a job, but a calling. It was a sacred duty, one that had been entrusted to me by the very land itself, and so I threw myself into my work, dedicating every waking moment to the protection and preservation of the forest. I studied the plants and animals, learning their ways and their secrets. I became a master of the land, able to read its signs and interpret its moods. But as the years passed, I began to feel the weight of my responsibility, the burden of my duty. I knew that I could not go on forever. Eventually, my time would come to an end. And so I began to search for a successor, someone who could take up the mantle of guardian and carry on my work. I looked for someone with the same passion, the same dedication to the land that I had. But it was not an easy task. Many came and went, I'm able to withstand the rigors of the job or the demands of the forest. Some were too weak, others too selfish. Still others simply could not understand the bond that I shared with the creature, the deep connection that we had forged over the years. Then one day, I found her. A young woman barely out of her teens, with a fire in her eyes and a love for the land that rivaled my own. Her name was Sarah. From the moment I met her, I knew she was the one. I took her under my wing, teaching her everything I knew about the forest and its creatures. I showed her the secret places, the hidden trails that only the Guardian could know. And I introduced her to the creature, watching as they formed their own bond, their own unique connection. Years passed, and Sarah grew into a strong, capable guardian. She had a way with animals, a gentle touch that could calm even the most frightened of creatures. She also had a fierce determination, a willingness to do whatever it took to protect the land. When the time came for me to step down, I did so with a heavy heart, but a clear conscience. I knew the forest was in good hands. Sarah would carry on my work with the same dedication and passion that I had. As I prepared to leave the forest for the last time, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had fulfilled my duty, given everything I had to the land and its creatures. And now, at last, I could rest. But as I turned to go, I heard a sound that made me pause. It was the creature emerging from the shadows to stand before me. Its yellow eyes were filled with an emotion I had never seen before, a deep sadness that seemed to emanate from its very soul. "You are leaving," it said in a whispery voice. After all these years, all that we have been through together, my throat grew tight with emotion as I nodded. "Yes," I said, my voice cracking. "It is time for me to go and make way for the next guardian." The creature was silent for a long moment, its gaze boring into mine. And then slowly it reached out a clawed hand and placed it on my shoulder. "You will be missed, my friend," it said, its voice filled with deep resonance. "The forest will not be the same without you." I felt tears spring to my eyes. My heart swelled with emotion. I had never realized just how much the creature had come to mean to me, or how deep our bond had grown over the years. As I looked into its eyes, I saw a reflection of my own feelings, a mirror of the love and respect we had for each other. "I will never forget you," I whispered, my voice choked with tears. "You have been my constant companion, my friend, and my guide, and I will carry you with me always in my heart and in my memories." The creature nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of its mouth. And then on the final squeeze of my shoulder, it turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving me alone in the clearing. I stood there for a long time, my eyes closed, my heart full of bittersweet joy. I had done what I had set out to do, had fulfilled my purpose in this life. And now, at last, I could rest secure in the knowledge that the forest was in good hands. So I left my steps heavy, but my heart light. I had lived a life of purpose, of meaning, and I knew that, no matter what the future held, I would always carry the forest with me, always hold the memory of the creature close to my heart. For I was the guardian of the forest, now and forever, and that was a bond that could never be broken, a love that would endure for all time. As I made my way out of the forest, I couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia wash over me. This place had been my home for so long, the trees and creatures my constant companions. Now I was leaving it all behind. But I knew that it was time for the forest to be ready for a new guardian. Sarah would do an excellent job, I had no doubt about that. She had the passion, dedication, and love for the land essential to the role. Still, it was hard to say goodbye. As I walked, memories flashed through my mind like snapshots from a bygone era. I remembered the first time I had seen the creature, the fear and awe that had gripped me in its presence. I remembered the long nights spent patrolling the forest, the quiet moments of contemplation under the stars. And I remembered the battles, the fights against those who sought to destroy the land for their own gain. The loggers, poachers, and developers. They had all come and gone, but the forest had endured, and it would continue to endure long after I was gone. As I reached the edge of the forest, I paused, taking one last look back at the place that had been my home for so long. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the trees. For a moment, I could almost imagine the creature standing there watching me go. But then the moment passed, and I turned away, ready to face the next chapter of my life. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I would always carry the forest with me, always hold the memory of my time as its guardian close to my heart. And so I walked on, my steps light and my heart full of hope. The lawn was a big place, full of wonders and mysteries, and I was ready to explore them all, to see what lay beyond the borders of the forest. As I made my way down the road, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement building within me. I'd spent so long in one place, so long focused on a single goal, and now I was free to go wherever I wanted, to do whatever I chose. But even as I reveled in my newfound freedom, I knew that I would never forget my time in the forest. It had shaped me, molded me into the person I am today. And it had given me a purpose, a reason for being. I thought back to my final conversation with the creature, to the words that it had spoken to me. "You will be missed, my friend," it said, its voice filled with emotion. "The forest will not be the same without you." And I knew that was true. The forest would go on, would thrive under Sarah's care, but it would never be quite the same, not without me there to watch over it. But that is the way of things, the natural order of the world. Everything changes, everything evolves, and I had played my part, had done what I was meant to do, and so I walked on, my head held high and my heart full of gratitude. I had been given a great gift, a chance to make a difference in the world, and I knew that no matter what the future holds, I would always be grateful for that. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear in the sky, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. I had lived a good life, had made a difference in the world, and that is all anyone could ask for in the end. And so I walked on, ready to face whatever lies ahead. The forest was behind me now, but it would always be a part of me, and I would always be its guardian, now and forever. Years passed, and I settled into a new life far from the forest. I found work as a park ranger in a different part of the country, my skills and experience serving me well in my new role. And though I was happy, though I found fulfillment in my work, there was always a part of me that missed the forest, that longed for the quiet solitude of the trees. I kept in touch with Sarah, receiving regular updates on the state of the forest and its creatures. She was doing an excellent job, just as I had known she would. The land was thriving under her care, and the creature had taken to her just as it had to me. But still, I couldn't help but feel a sense of longing, a desire to return to the place that had been my home for so long. And so, when the opportunity arose for me to take a sabbatical, I jumped at the chance. I packed my bags and set out for the forest, my heart racing with anticipation. It had been years since I had last set foot in those woods, and I didn't know what to expect. Would the creatures still remember me? Would the trees still whisper their secrets to me? As I made my way through the familiar trails, I couldn't help but feel a sense of homecoming wash over me. The forest was just as I remembered it. The air thick with the scent of pine and the sound of birdsong. And then as I rounded a bend in the trail, I saw it. The creature standing tall and proud in the center of a small clearing. Its yellow eyes were fixed on me, and for a moment I froze, unsure of what to do. But then slowly the creature began to move towards me, its steps slow and deliberate. And as it drew closer, I saw something in its eyes that I had never seen before. Recognition and a deep, abiding love. "You have returned," it said, its voice a rumble in the stillness of the forest. "I knew that you would someday." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. I had to. This place, these woods, they are a part of me, just as I am a part of them. The creature nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of its mouth. "And so you are," it said, its voice filled with warmth. "You will always be welcome here, always be a part of this place." We talked then, the creature and I, catching up on all that had happened in the years since I had left. It told me about the challenges Sarah had faced, the battles she had won, and it told me about the changes that had come to the forest, the new life that had sprung up in the wake of my departure. And as we talked, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a deep contentment that I had never known before. I had found my place and the world made a difference in the lives of so many, and now at last I could rest secure in the knowledge that the forest was in good hands. As the sun began to set and the shadows lengthened, I knew it was time for me to go. I had to return to my own life, my own responsibilities, but I knew a part of me would always remain here in the forest that had been my home for so long. I said my goodbyes to the creature, promising to return again someday. And as I made my way back down the trail, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude washing over me. I had been given a great gift, a chance to make a difference in the world, and I had made the most of it. As I drove away from the forest, I couldn't help but reflect on all that had happened, on all that I had learned. I had started out as just another park ranger, content to spend my days patrolling the woods and keeping watch over the land. But the creature had shown me a different path, and taught me the true meaning of guardianship. And now, as I looked back on my life, I knew that I had found my calling. I had been the guardian of the forest, the protector of the land. And though my time in that role had come to an end, I knew that the lessons I had learned would stay with me forever. I thought of Sarah, the young woman who had taken up the mantle of guardianship in my stead. I knew that she would face challenges just as I had, but I also knew that she was strong, that she had the courage and dedication to see it through. And I thought of the creature, the being that had been my constant companion throughout all the years. It had taught me so much, had shown me the true beauty and power of the natural world. And though I might never see it again, I knew that it would always be with me, a part of me, just as I was a part of it. As the miles stretched out behind me and the forest faded into the distance, I felt a sense of peace washing over me. I had lived a good life, made a difference in the world, and that was all anyone could ask for in the end. And so I drove on into the sunset, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The forest was behind me now, but it would always be a part of me. I would always be its guardian now and forever. The old ranger's tale spread quickly, passing from one generation to another. Some dismissed it as nothing more than a legend, a story told around the campfire to frighten children and entertain tourists. But others knew better. They had seen the signs, felt the presence of something ancient and powerful in those woods. And so the legend grew, taking on a life of its own. People came from far and wide to see the forest, to walk the same trails that the Guardian had once patrolled. Though they might not have seen the creature themselves, they could feel its presence, sense the magic that lingered in the air. Years turned into decades. The world changed around the forest. Cities grew and expanded, technology advanced at a rapid pace, but the forest remained, a bastion of wilderness in a rapidly developing world. And always there were the guardians, men and women who had heard the call, felt the pull of the forest in their hearts. They came from all walks of life, all corners of the globe, but they all shared one thing in common, a deep love for the land and a fierce desire to protect it. And so the legacy of the Guardian lived on, passed down from one generation to the next. And although the names and faces might change, the spirit of the forest remained the same. Wild, untamed, and forever free. As for me, I lived out the rest of my days in peace, content in the knowledge that I had made a difference. I watched from afar as the world changed and evolved, as new challenges arose and were met head-on by the guardians of the forest. And when my time finally came, I knew that I was ready. I had lived a long and full life, had seen and done things that most people could only dream of, and though I might be gone, I knew that my legacy would live on, carried forward by the guardians who came after me. And so I closed my eyes for the last time, with a smile on my face and a sense of peace in my heart. I had been the guardian of the forest, the protector of the land, and that was a title that I would carry with me into whatever lay beyond. But I knew that the forest would endure long after I was gone. It would continue to thrive, grow, change, and evolve. And always there would be the guardians, the men and women who had heard the call and answered it with all their hearts. And so I passed from this world, secure in the knowledge that I had made a difference. The forest had been my home, my life's work, and though I might be gone, it would always be a part of me, just as I was a part of it. Forever and always, I had been the guardian of the forest. And that was a legacy that would never die. I was sitting behind the wheel of my car, tapping the dashboard, when I saw the mile marker slip past 36, and I still had no idea where I was going. I had planned to meet a couple of friends at a cabin in northern Georgia, just off some stretch of the Appalachian Trail. I hadn't been paying attention, missed the exit an hour ago, and here I was, of course, in the middle of some back road that wasn't even showing up on my GPS. My phone was long out of service. The year was 2000, back when it was still acceptable to get lost without a smartphone guiding your every step. I'm no stranger to getting myself into dumb situations. I've always been more of a figure-it-out-as-I-go kind of guy, but this was turning into one of those moments I'd later regret. I pulled over at what looked like a gravel shoulder next to a small creek and stared at the last gasp of daylight fading behind the trees. I am Max Henderson, by the way. Not much to say about me. I work in construction, live alone, and have more canceled dates than I care to admit. I enjoy hiking and getting off the grid now and then. Something about this silence and solitude draws me, but today's off-the-grid adventure was taking a turn I didn't much like. As I climbed out of the car and stretched my legs, I saw something moving in the woods. It was subtle. A quick rustle in the thick brush, too quiet for most people to notice. But my time outdoors had taught me to spot oddities. I chalked it up to a deer or something, not thinking much about it. I opened the trunk to check for some water, and that's when I heard the noise again, closer this time, like snapping twigs. I turned to the forest edge, scanning the darkening landscape. The trees were thick with pine needles, and the fading light cast shadows that made it hard to see. I stood there for a moment, watching, waiting for something to reveal itself, but nothing came. Just that eerie silence that presses in on you when you're all alone in the wilderness. I shrugged it off, slammed the trunk shut, and pulled out my flashlight. The beam cut through the dusk, and I pointed it down the road. There wasn't a single other car or person in sight. I figured if I kept driving straight, eventually I'd hit some kind of intersection that could guide me back to a main road. But before I could get back into the driver's seat, something slammed into my car with a sickening crunch. The whole vehicle rocked violently as if something heavy had run into it from the side. My heart jumped into my throat, and I whipped around, aiming the flashlight toward the rear of the car. For a moment, nothing moved. And then I saw it, a flash of skin, pale and dirty, disappearing into the tree line. I ran toward the spot where the figure had vanished, trying to make sense of what I saw. The flashlight flickered over branches and leaves, but revealed no movement. Just that suffocating silence. There was no way it could have been an animal. The figure had looked human, and from the size of the impact, it had to have been more than just someone stumbling into my car. "Hey!" I yelled out, but the words swallowed my voice like it was never there. I stood, frozen, flashlight in hand, feeling the weight of something watching me from the darkness. The air felt thick and suffocating, even as if the trees themselves were closing in. After a few tense minutes, I decided to stop playing detective and get back to the car. I wasn't equipped for a search and rescue mission in the middle of nowhere. As soon as I turned, something darted out from the trees fast. I barely registered what was happening before a figure lunged at me from the shadows. The flashlight dropped from my hand and I hit the dirt hard. The breath was knocked out of me and all I could see was a blur of limbs struggling on top of me. Lava or whatever it was smelled rancid like old sweat and decay. I fought against the weight, managing to roll out from underneath. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the flashlight again, and swung it wildly toward the figure. The beam caught a glimpse of someone standing there. A man. His skin was leathery and marbled with dirt. His hair was matted and tangled. His clothes were nothing more than rags clinging to a gold frame. He was breathing heavily, almost inhumanly fast. His eyes wide with some kind of feromania. "Get the hell away from me," I shouted. I'm not sure if he could understand me or even cared. He didn't say a word. He just smiled, if you could call it that. It was more of a grimace showing yellow rotting teeth. Then he turned and darted back into the woods, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared, swallowed up by the shadows. I wasn't waiting around to see if he came back. I got into the car, locked the doors, and floored the gas tires, spitting gravel as I sped away down the road. My mind was racing. Who was that guy? And why had he attacked me out here in the middle of nowhere? Every nerve in my body was screaming to get as far away from here as possible. But a few miles down the road, my headlights caught something else. A house. It was an old, decrepit thing, barely standing under the weight of years of neglect. The windows were broken, the roof sagging in places, but there was a light on inside. Against every ounce of instinct screaming at me to keep driving, I stopped the car. Maybe I could get direction, or at least find out if anyone knew who that feral man in the woods was. I left the engine running as I got out, walking cautiously toward the house. The closer I got, the more I realized just how isolated this place was. The woods pressed in around it menacingly, and the air felt colder here, more oppressive. I knocked on the door, the sound echoing strangely in the silence. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time, and the door creaked open a few inches on its own. "Hello," I called out, stepping back in case anyone inside was armed. Still nothing. I wasn't about to go barging in, but I could see into the dimly lit foyer. The walls were lined with shelves, and from where I stood I could see jars filled with what looked like bones, dried plants, and other macabre things I couldn't quite make out. The stench hit me next, rotten and moldy, like something had died in there a long time ago. Against my better judgment, I pushed the door open a little more and shoved the flashlight inside. The floor cracked ominously under my weight as I took a single step into the entryway. That's when I heard it. A soft shuffle from somewhere deeper in the house, like someone dragging their feet along the floor. "Who's there?" I shouted, gripping the flashlight tighter, but the only response was more stifling silence. I stepped back, ready to leave, when something slammed into the door behind me with a bang, forcing it shut. My heart pounded in my chest, and I turned, shining the light directly at the door. There was nothing there, but the door was closed now and I hadn't touched it. That's when I heard the voices, low, garbled whispers echoing from somewhere within the walls. My skin crawled and I felt the overwhelming urge to get out of there. I turned to leave, but something grabbed me from behind. A hand, filthy with long broken fingernails, latched onto my arm, pulling me backward with an inhuman strength. I spun around, throwing my weight into the person, but it didn't matter. Whoever it was had a grip like iron. I hit the ground hard and the flashlight rolled out of my hand, casting eerie shadows on the walls as it spun. Above me, the figure loomed. A woman this time. She was older, but her body was thin and wasted away. Her hair was long and tangled, and her face was twisted into something that barely resembled human. Her lips pulled back in that same unsettling grimace I'd seen on the man in the woods. She dragged me across the floor toward the back of the house, muttering something under her breath, words I couldn't make out. but the tone was unmistakably hostile. I kicked and struggled, but it was like fighting against a brick wall. In the dim light, I saw the door. She was pulling me toward a basement. My mind raced. I had to get out. Now, using every bit of strength I had left, I twisted my body and kicked her square in the stomach. The blows surprised her, and she let go just long enough for me to scramble to my feet. I bolted for the door, grabbing the flashlight as I ran. My hand fumbled with the handle for what felt like an eternity before the door finally gave way, and I burst outside into the cool night air. I didn't stop running. I didn't look back. I just ran, crashing through the underbrush until I made it back to my car. I flung open the door, threw myself inside, and hit the gas before I even had a chance to buckle my seatbelt. The road ahead blurred as my mind raced to process what had just happened. Who were those people? What was going on in that house? But I didn't stop to ponder. Not until I reached the nearest town, miles away, where I finally pulled over at a gas station. I stumbled inside, disheveled and out of breath, and tried to explain what had happened to the befuddled attendant. He looked at me like I was crazy, but he called the sheriff's office anyway. When the deputies arrived, I told them everything about the man in the woods, the woman in the house, the strange basement. Everything. They listened, took notes, but their expressions didn't shift from that skeptical look I've seen 100 times. You know the one. It's the look people give you when they think you're off your rocker, but don't want to say it out loud. Well, check it out, one of the deputies said. You said the house was about 10 miles north on the old forest road. Yeah, I nodded, still rattled, but certain about what I saw. Look, I know how it sounds, but something's seriously wrong out there. There were at least 2 people, 1 man, 1 woman. They attacked me. There's something going on in that house. The deputies exchanged a glance, clearly not convinced, but bound by duty to follow up. We'll take a look, the other one said then, motioning toward my car. You good to drive? I nodded, still feeling the adrenaline coursing through me. Yeah, I'll be fine. Hey on home. Well, be in touch if we find anything. The first deputy said with a dismissive wave as they got into their cruiser. I got back into my car, but I didn't drive off immediately. I sat there for a while staring into the distance, trying to piece together what the hell had just happened. The more I thought about it, the less it made sense. But that didn't change the fact that it had happened. Those people were out there, and whatever they were doing, it wasn't good. The drive home was a blur. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was past midnight. I locked the doors behind me, double-checked the windows, and sat on the couch staring blankly at the TV, which I hadn't even turned on. I couldn't shake the images from my head. The man's wild eyes, the woman's cold grip, the basement door looming in the dim light. The next morning, my phone rang. It was the sheriff's office. Mr. Henderson, a gruff voice asked. Yeah, this is Matt. I replied, my throat dry. We sent a couple of deputies out to that location you mentioned. They didn't find anything. House was abandoned. No sign of recent activity. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. That's impossible. I was there last night. They attacked me. Well, they're not there now. Place looked like it's been empty for years. You're sure about what you saw? Of course. I'm sure, I snapped. Frustration boiling over. Oh, what I saw. Those people, they were real. The sheriff sighed. Look, we're not saying you're making it up. But sometimes when you're out there in the woods, things can play tricks on you. Maybe an old squatter or something moved on. Either way, we're not finding anything. I hung up angry and disoriented. The house, the attack? It wasn't just a hallucination. I could still feel the bruises on my arms from where the woman had grabbed me. I wasn't crazy. I couldn't let it go. Later that evening, I found myself driving back toward that stretch of road, the scene of the attack, pulling me in like gravity. Part of me wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't losing it. I had to know. When I finally reached the spot, it was dusk again, and the house stood there like a specter, just as decrepit as I'd left it. I parked my car, leaving the engine running, and stepped out cautiously. The air felt wrong again, thick, oppressive, as if the woods themselves were pushing against me. But I moved forward, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. The house looked unchanged, still sagging, still crumbling, but I wasn't interested in the outside. I pushed the door open again and stepped inside. The smell hit me just as hard as it had the night before, but now I knew it wasn't just old mildew. Something had been living here. I scanned the room with a flashlight, and that's when I saw it. A pile of old, rotting blankets in the corner, barely visible beneath a mountain of debris. Something shifted underneath them. My heart stopped, ready to bolt. But before I could move, the pile stirred again and something emerged. It wasn't the woman, it was a child. She was small, maybe 8 or 9 years old, covered in dirt and wearing clothes that looked like they'd been ripped apart by wild animals. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, but she didn't make a sound. She just stared at me, clutching something in her hands, a small makeshift doll made of sticks and cloth. "Hey," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer, just stood there trembling slightly, but not moving. My mind raced. Who was this kid? Was she part of that family? Had they left her behind? Before I could say anything else, the door to the basement creaked open. I froze. The sound echoed through the silent house like a gunshot, and my instinct screamed at me to run. I turned my flashlight toward the door, but I couldn't see anything beyond the dark stairwell leading down. I took a step toward the girl, thinking I could grab her and get out of there. But before I could move, the woman from the night before appeared at the top of the stairs. She was different now, more composed, as if she'd been waiting for me. Her smile was gone, replaced by a look of cold, calculated malice. Without thinking, I grabbed the girl's hand and bolted for the door. The woman lunged after us, but I slammed the door shut behind me and ran toward the car, dragging the girl along with me. The door banged violently as I fumbled with the keys, but we made it to the car before she could catch us. I threw the girl into the passenger seat and floored it. The tires spun in the gravel as we sped away. I didn't stop driving until we were miles down the road, the house nothing but a distant nightmare. The girl sat silently beside me, staring straight ahead, clutching her doll like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't take her back there. After what felt like hours, I finally found a gas station. I pulled in, parked, and turned to the girl. "Are you okay?" I asked, but she didn't respond. She just looked at me with those hollow eyes, not understanding or maybe not able to speak. I went inside and called the sheriff's office again. This time they took me a bit more seriously. When the deputies arrived, I told them everything about the woman, the girl, the house, but the girl still wouldn't say a word. She just sat in the back of the patrol car, clutching her doll, staring into space. Chapter 4, the deputies drove me back out to the house, this time with more backup. They searched the place top to bottom, but by the time they got there, the house was empty again. No sign of the woman, no sign of anyone else. The basement was filled with old furniture, broken tools, and piles of garbage, but no people. What about the girl? I asked, trying to make sense of it all. She was there with them. Mom left her behind. Oh, the deputies shrugged. She's not saying much of anything right now. We'll take her into custody. Try to figure out where she came from. But something told me I'd never get answers. Not from the girl, not from the deputies, and not from that house. As we drove away, I felt a chill settle over me. Not just fear, but something worse. A grim realization that I was peering into a darkness I couldn't fully comprehend. I didn't know what I had stumbled into, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. Whatever was living in that house, it wasn't just a family of squatters or vagrants. It was something much more sinister, something I didn't want to understand. When the deputies dropped me back at my car, they told me they'd be in touch if they found anything more. But I never heard from them again. The girl, I don't know what happened to her. I like to think they found her a safe place, far away from those woods and whatever horrors lurked there. But the truth is, I'll probably never know. Some questions are better left unanswered. As for me, I stick to the main roads. Now I'm done with back roads and shortcuts, done with getting lost. Because getting lost, as I've learned, can lead you to places you never wanted to go, places that change you in ways you can't undo. That house in the woods, those people, they haunt me. Not in my dreams, but in the quiet moments when I'm alone with thoughts. I find myself wondering about them, about what made them the way they were. But I always stop myself, because some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. It's been years since that night, but the memory hasn't faded. If anything, it's gotten clearer, like a photograph developing in reverse. I've tried to move on, to chalk it up to a bad experience, a wrong turn taken. But it's not that simple. I've done some research since then, looking into the history of that area. I found out that the house had been there for decades, standing long before the current roads were built. It had passed through many hands over the years, but the records were spotty at best. There were gaps, years where it seemed to simply disappear from the books. The most recent owner was a man named Jacob Holter. He bought the place in the late 80s and lived there for a while with his family. But after a few years, they just vanished. No forwarding address, no record of them moving away. They were just gone. There were rumors, of course. There always are in small towns. People said Jacob was into some dark things, that he practiced rituals in those woods. They said his wife Mara was never quite right after their son died, that she'd gone mad with grief. But rumors are just that, rumors. No one really knew what happened to the Holters, just like no one really knows what happened to me that night. I've thought about going back, about trying to find answers. But every time I get close, every time I find myself heading down that old forest road, I turn back. Because the truth is, I'm afraid, not of the house or the woods or even the people that live there, but of the darkness they represent. We all have our shadows, the parts of ourselves we keep hidden. Most of us keep them locked away, safe in the depths of our minds. But sometimes, in some people, those shadows take over. They become the reality, and the person we once knew is lost forever. I think that's what happened to the Holters. And maybe in some way it's what happened to me too. Because ever since that night I've felt a darkness in myself, a void that I can't quite fill. It's like a part of me got lost in those woods and never came back. So I keep moving, keep pushing forward. I surround myself with light and laughter and try to forget the shadows. But they're always there, waiting in the quiet moments, whispering of the darkness that lies just beyond the edge of the road. That's the thing about getting lost. Sometimes, even when you find your way back, a part of you stays lost forever. And all you can do is learn to live with the void it leaves behind. My old house is still there, nestled in the woods off that old forest road. I know because I checked. Not in person, I couldn't bring myself to do that. But on maps and satellite images, it stands there, a dark blot in the green, waiting. I wonder sometimes if the girl made it out okay, if she was able to find a new life somewhere. Perhaps I hope she found the light that I'm still searching for. But mostly I wonder about the shadows, the ones in that house, the ones in those woods, and the ones in myself. I wonder if they'll ever truly go away, or if they'll always be there waiting for me to take another wrong turn. That's the legacy of that night. The Babna I carry with me. Not just the memory, but the knowledge. The knowledge that the darkness is real and it's waiting, always waiting, for the lost, the lonely, the ones who stray from the path. So if you're out there driving down some back road and you see a house in the woods, a light in the window, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't look back. Because in this world there are places we're not meant to go. Places that change us, that mark us. Places like that house in the woods, where the shadows live and the darkness never end. It started in a manner that I'd later realize was routine for this line of work. Quiet, unassuming, and a little too easy. My name is Gregor Falco, and I'm part of a unit that doesn't exist on paper. You're not here to impress anyone with heroics or brag about medals, because there aren't any. We're called the Department of Unnatural Phenomena Control Cryptid Hunters, if you prefer a simpler term. Sounds like a joke, doesn't it? But when you've spent over a decade chasing things that defy the laws of nature, you start to realize the joke's on you. I'm the kind of guy who doesn't like to make things complicated. After a stint in the military, where my aptitude for not asking too many questions caught the eye of some very serious people, I got into this job. They handed me a contract, didn't bother with the fine print, and just like that, I was tracking things that most people only encounter in nightmares. This time they sent me to a small town in northern Minnesota. It wasn't the first time I'd been to one of these places where the population dwindles and those who remain don't ask much about the things that go bump in the night. The town was called Varning, and I was called in after the locals reported several missing persons. The last guy to vanish was a park ranger named Dale Hollis. They found what was left of him scattered in the underbrush near a state park. And if that's not a clear sign of trouble, I don't know what is. I've got a habit of making conversation with locals when I arrive somewhere new. It's not in the job description, but gives me a feel for what's going on. Varney was no different. The sheriff, a tired-looking man with a thick graying mustache, briefed me on the situation. It was the usual story. People heard strange noises in the woods, animals acting out of character, and then folks started disappearing. What made this different was the manner in which they found Ranger Hollis. Like something had mauled him, but no animal known in these parts could have done that. After getting the rundown, I drove out to the state park where Hollis had been stationed. It was late afternoon by the time I arrived. The sky a dull, overcast gray that promised rain. I parked near the ranger's cabin and stepped out, breathing in the cold, damp air. The place had that eerie stillness I'd come to associate with these cases. Like the forest itself was holding its breath. The cabin was basic, wooden walls, tin roof, and not much in the way of decoration. Inside I found Hollis' logbook on the desk. He'd made a note of strange occurrences in the days leading up to his death. The last entry stood out. Something's been following me. I see it just out of the corner of my eye. I know it's there, but every time I turn around, it's gone. I think it wants me to know it's coming. Now, I've dealt with a lot of creatures in my time. Some are purely animalistic, acting on instinct, while others are smarter, far too smart. The way Hollis described being stalked made me think we were dealing with something from the latter category. I spent the next few hours combing through the woods near the cabin. The rain had started to fall by then, turning the ground into a slick mess. I wasn't alone, of course. There were 2 other members of my unit, both stationed at different points around the park. We kept in constant radio contact, but as night fell, we agreed to regroup and reevaluate our approach in the morning. That was when I saw it, just for a split second, but it was enough. A silhouette in the distance, standing on 2 legs but hunched as though it carried the weight of the world on its back. It was large, probably around 8 feet tall, and moved with a slow, deliberate pace. I couldn't make out many details, but it reminded me of a cross between a bear and a gorilla. If either of those things had skin like bark and a body that seemed to blend into the surroundings, I didn't approach it. One thing you learn quickly in this job is that curiosity kills more than cats. Instead, I quietly radioed my team and gave them my position. We set up a loose perimeter and waited as the hours dragged by and the cold seeped into our bones, but the creature never reappeared. It was like it knew we were there and was toying with us. When the first light of dawn broke, we retreated to our vehicles. The tension was thick. Each of us was keenly aware that we were being hunted. This was no ordinary animal, and it certainly wasn't something we could just track down and eliminate with bullets alone. We needed a strategy. The next day, we spent our time setting up traps and motion sensors around the park. By evening, the rain had turned to sleet, and the temperature had dropped even further. I'd been monitoring the sensors from a portable terminal in the cabin when an alarm went off. Something had triggered one of the traps near the northern edge of the park. Without wasting a moment, we headed out, weapons ready. The trap we'd set was a simple but effective one, a snare that would pin down whatever tried to cross it. As we approached, I saw the creature struggling against the thick wire, its bark-like skin scraping against the metal. It was even larger up close, its limbs longer and more twisted than I'd imagined. Its face was hidden behind a massive matted fur, but the rest of it was covered in what looked like hardened scales, cracked and flaking like old wood. We moved quickly, surrounding the creature, guns trained on it. But before we could take the shot, the creature did something that stopped us cold. It began to speak, not in words, but in a series of low rumbling sounds that seemed to vibrate through the ground. It wasn't a language I recognized, but there was a clear intent behind it, a warning maybe, or a plea. One of the team members, a man named Burks, fired his weapon. The creature howled and thrashed. The bullet tore through its side, but it wasn't enough to kill it. Instead, it snapped the wire with a surge of strength and lunged at Burks. I barely had time to react before the creature was on him, its massive jaws clamping down on his shoulder. The sound of bones snapping echoed through the trees as I raised my gun and fired again, aiming for the head this time. The creature stumbled back, releasing Burks, who collapsed to the ground, blood pouring from his wounds. It wasn't dead, but it was hurt, and it began to retreat into the forest, dragging its injured body with a slow, deliberate motion. We pursued it for a short distance, but the thick underbrush and rapidly fading light made it impossible to keep up. By the time we returned to the cabin, Burks was barely clinging to life. We patched him up as best we could, but his injuries were severe. The next morning I radioed for an evacuation and they airlifted him out of there. The rest of us stayed behind, determined to finish the job. We tracked the creature to a cave system on the outskirts of the park. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of decay, and the ground was littered with bones, animal and human alike. This was its lair, the place where it had been dragging its victims. The creature was there too, lying in a pool of its own blood, but it wasn't dead yet. It watched us with dark, intelligent eyes, a strange, almost resigned look in its gaze. I fired the last shot, the bullet piercing through the creature's skull. It let out one final shuddering breath before going still. There was no mystery to its death. No disappearing body, no supernatural vanishing act. It was just a dead creature, as real and solid as the world around it. We took photos, collected samples, and bagged up what we could for further study. When we left the cave, the rain had stopped and the sun was breaking through the clouds. It was a rare sight for that part of the world, and it felt like a small victory in itself. Burke survived, but he won't be returning to the field anytime soon. They'll probably find him a desk job somewhere. He won't have to worry about things lurking in the dark. As for me, I'm off to the next case, wherever that may be. The thing about this job is you don't dwell on the past. You handle the situation, clean up the mess, and move on. Because there's always something else out there, something waiting to be found or to find you. But this case stuck with me in a way few others had. Maybe it was the way the creature had spoken, the intelligence behind those dark eyes, or maybe it was the sheer brutality of what it had done to Hollis and the others. Either way, I found myself digging deeper into local lore, trying to understand what this thing was and where it had come from. The locals had a name for it, the Wendigo, a creature born from cannibalism and greed, cursed to wander the forests in an endless hunt for human flesh. The stories varied, but they all agreed on one thing: once a Wendigo had your scent, it would never stop hunting you. I couldn't shake the feeling that we only scratched the surface of this thing's true nature, that there was more to the story than just a monstrous predator. So I did what I always do in these situations. I kept digging. I spent the next few weeks tracking down every scrap of information I could find on the Wendigo. Old newspaper articles, native folklore, even some fringe conspiracy theories. And the more I learned, the more I began to understand the true horror of what we were dealing with. The Wendigo wasn't just a creature, it was a manifestation of human evil, a punishment for those who took more than their share, who consumed without thought for the consequences. And it wasn't confined to the forests of Minnesota. There were stories of similar creatures across the globe, each born from the darkest impulses of humanity. But there was one detail that kept nagging at me. In all the stories, the Wendigo was a solitary creature. It hunted alone, driven by its insatiable hunger. Yet the creature we'd encountered seemed to be part of something larger, the way it had spoken, the intelligence in its eyes. It was like it was communicating with something else, something we couldn't see. I knew I was venturing into dangerous territory, but I couldn't let it go. I started reaching out to contacts in other parts of the world, asking about similar incidents. And that's when I stumbled upon a pattern. In the last few years, there had been a surge in disappearances in remote areas across the globe. Hikers, campers, even entire villages vanishing without a trace. And in each case, there were whispers of something in the shadows, something that defied explanation. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was mounting. There was a network of these creatures, a hidden ecosystem of predators that had existed alongside humanity for centuries. And they were growing bolder, more aggressive, like they knew their time was coming. I brought my findings to my superiors, but they were skeptical. They didn't want to believe that there could be a threat of this magnitude lurking in the shadows. They told me to focus on the cases at hand, to leave the bigger picture to those above my pay grade. But I couldn't let it go. I started taking more risks, venturing deeper into the wilderness in search of answers. That's when I started to notice the signs, the feeling of being watched, the sense that something was always just out of sight. I was being hunted just like Hollis had been. I knew I was getting close to something, but I didn't know how close until it was too late. I was investigating a string of disappearances in the Pacific Northwest when I found myself face to face with another of these creatures. But this one was different. It was older, stronger, and it had a message for me. In a series of guttural growls and gestures, it made it clear that I was treading on forbidden ground, that the secrets I was uncovering were not meant for human eyes, and that if I didn't back off, I would become their next prey. I've never been one to back down from a fight, but I knew when I was outmatched. I retreated, but not before I caught a glimpse of something that chilled me to the bone. Behind the creature, in the shadows of the trees, were dozens of glowing eyes, a pack of Wendigos watching and waiting. I made it back to civilization, but I knew my days were numbered. I had seen too much, learned too much, and the Wendigos wouldn't let me live with that knowledge. I tried to warn my superiors, but they wouldn't listen. They said I was paranoid, that the stress of the job was getting to me. They even suggested I take a leave of absence, get some rest. But I knew rest was a luxury I could no longer afford. I started to prepare to gather what resources I could. I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone, but I didn't know who I could trust. The Wendigos had eyes and ears everywhere, even within the department. That's when I got the call. It was from an old friend, someone I had served with in the military. He had heard rumors of my investigations and wanted to offer his help. He said he had resources, connections that he could help me take the fight to the Wendigos. I was hesitant at first, but I knew I was running out of options. I agreed to meet with him to hear him out. But when I arrived at the rendezvous point, he wasn't alone. There were others with him, men and women from all walks of life. Some I recognized from my own investigations. Others were strangers. But they all had one thing in common. They had all been touched by the Wendigos in some way. There was a native elder who had lost his entire village, or a journalist who had stumbled upon the truth and been marked for death. Even a high-ranking government official who had been secretly fighting this war for decades. They had a plan. They had been watching the Wendigos, studying their movements and habits. They knew where they were weak, where they could be struck, and they wanted me to lead the charge. I was hesitant at first, knowing the risks involved. But as I looked around at the faces of those gathered, I saw the same determination, the same fire that had driven me for so long. Not only I had found my army, who struck hard and fast, hitting the Wendigos in their own territory. We used every trick in the book, every weapon at our disposal. Slowly, incrementally, we began to turn the tide. But the Wendigos were old and cunning. It wouldn't go down without a fight. They struck back at us, picking off our members one by one, and with each loss, our resolve only grew stronger. In the end, it came down to a final confrontation. We had tracked the leader of the Wendigos to its lair, a cave system deep in the heart of the wilderness. Down there, in the bowels of the earth, we fought our last battle. It was a battle unlike any I'd ever experienced. The Wendigos were stronger, faster, more vicious than anything we had encountered before. But we had something they didn't. The strength of human spirit. We fought with everything we had. And in the end we emerged victorious. The leader of the Wendigos lay dead at our feet, and with its death the power of the others began to wane. But the war was far from over. The Wendigos were a symptom of a greater evil, a darkness that had taken root in the heart of humanity. And as long as that darkness persisted, there would always be monsters in the shadows. As for me, I knew my journey was just beginning. I had seen the truth of the world and I couldn't unsee it. I had a new mission, a new purpose, to stand watch against the darkness, to be the shield that protected the innocent from the horrors that lurked in the night. And so I set out once more into the wilderness, into the unknown. Because, in the end, that's where I belong. In the spaces between the shadows, in the cracks where the light doesn't reach. Hunting the things that hunt us, so that others may live in peace. It's a lonely life, a dangerous life. But it's the only life I know. And as long as there are monsters in the dark, I'll be there to fight them. Until my last breath. Until the darkness takes me to. But until then, I'll keep hunting. Keep fighting. Keep searching for the truth that lies beyond the shadows. Because, in the end, that's all we have. The truth and the courage to face it. When the wind rustles through the pine needles, it whispers secrets. Most people don't listen, but I've learned that silence and patience are as much a part of survival as food and shelter. My name is Raymond Devereaux, and I've been working as a park ranger in the depths of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. A place so remote it feels like the edge of the earth. Out here, solitude is your closest companion, and the wilderness holds tight to its mysteries. Before this job, I worked in IT, a far cry from the life I lead now. Back then, I was trapped in a cubicle, suffocating under the weight of fluorescent lights and endless spreadsheets. The mountains and forests called to me, offering an escape. I couldn't resist, so I sold everything I owned, bought a cabin, and traded my suit for flannel and boots. Out here, I found a rhythm in solitude, a sense of purpose that was absent in the buzzing confines of the city. The park I oversee isn't famous, no postcards feature its vistas, and tourists rarely stray this far north. But that's the way I like it. It's a place where nature reigns supreme, and the presence of man is but a faint echo. The days are usually uneventful. Typical ranger duties include maintaining trails, ensuring wildlife stays undisturbed, and occasionally guiding rare visitors who lose their way. This day started like any other. I began by checking boundary markers deep in the forest, places where trees grow so close together that the sky above is reduced to thin slivers of light. I was on my way to an old, almost forgotten trail that wound through a particularly dense section of the park. The trail had been closed for years due to frequent landslides. Few knew it even existed. But I liked to walk it now and then to remind myself why it had been closed in the first place. The air was crisp, the kind that stings your lungs with every breath. As I made my way along the trail, I noticed something unusual, a set of tracks leading off the path. They weren't animal tracks. They were too large, too deep, and the spacing was all wrong, as if whatever made them had an odd loping gait. I've seen plenty of bear and wolf tracks in my time, but this was different, something I couldn't identify. Curiosity overtook me, and I followed the tracks. They led deeper into the forest, where the trees were older and the underbrush thicker. The silence around me grew heavier, oppressive, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I pushed onward, the trees seeming to close in around me as I went, and then I found the first body. It was a deer, or at least what was left of one. Its ribcage had been torn open, the insides hollowed out with precision that seemed almost surgical. I've seen predators take down prey before, but this wasn't the work of any bear or wolf. The flesh was flayed clean, the bones picked with meticulous care. Whatever did this wasn't just hunting, it was something else entirely. I took a step back, instinctively reaching for the radio on my belt, but stopped myself. The nearest ranger station was over 20 miles away, and I knew how my voice would sound over the airwaves, shaky, uncertain, like a man who had seen a ghost. Instead, I pulled out my camera, snapping a few pictures of the carcass. The unease in my gut grew stronger, but I pushed it aside. I had to find out what had made those tracks. The trail of blood led me further into the trees, past more signs of carnage. A rabbit here, a fox there, all ripped apart and left in the same eerie, meticulous fashion. It wasn't just the killing that was strange, it was the way the bodies were left, as if arranged deliberately like some kind of grotesque offering. I came to a small clearing where the trees opened up just enough to let in a bit of gray light. In the center was something I still can't fully explain, a creature, hunched and massive, crouched over another body, a human body this time. The thing's back was to me, but I could see its silhouette clearly. Long limbs, almost too long, with joints that bent at unnatural angles. Its skin was covered in patches of matted fur, but not enough to be mistaken for any known animal. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The creature's head jerked up and it turned slowly, as if sensing my presence. I had a brief glimpse of its face, flat, elongated, with a mouth that seemed to stretch too wide. It looked at me with a gaze that pierced through the growing dusk, and for a moment I felt as though it could see right into my soul. Instinct took over. I raised my rifle, more a tool for show than anything, and fired. The sound echoed through the trees, and the creature recoiled, letting out a sound that was neither animal nor human. It wasn't a roar or a scream, but something worse, something that reverberated inside my skull and made my teeth ache. The thing leapt at me with a speed I couldn't match. Its long limbs propelled it forward in a nightmarish sprint. I stumbled back, firing again and again. The shots were wild and panicked. One of the bullets hit, and the creature let out another one of those terrible sounds before dropping to the ground, twitching. I stood there, shaking my rifle, still aimed at the thing as it lay on the ground. It didn't move. Slowly I approached, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The creature was dead, its body sprawled out in the clearing. The human it had been feasting on lay forgotten beside it. I knelt down to get a closer look at the creature. Its body was covered in scars, some fresh, others old, crisscrossing its limbs and torso. The hands, or claws more accurately, were long and gnarled with fingers ending in sharp black nails. But it was the mouth that disturbed me the most. It was lined with rows of teeth, not unlike those of a shark, serrated and deadly, clearly built for tearing flesh apart. I moved to the human body. Next, my stomach churning. It was a man, his face unrecognizable, mutilated beyond identification. His clothes were torn to shreds, but from the remnants I could see he had been wearing a jacket similar to the ones park rangers wore. The ID badge was pinned to what was left of his shirt. I pulled it free, wiping away the blood to read the name. Joseph Langley. I knew Joseph. He had been a ranger here long before I arrived, but went missing a few months after I started. No one knew what happened to him. Search parties had combed through these woods for days, but found nothing until now. As I stood there, the reality of what I had discovered began to sink in. That Joseph hadn't just gone missing. He had been hunted, stalked by this creature just like the animals I had seen along the way. And though I had killed the thing that did it, I couldn't stay there any longer. I needed to get back to the station to report what I had found. I took one last look at the creature's body, making sure it was truly dead before turning and starting back through the forest. The walk back was a blur, my mind racing as I tried to process what had happened. When I finally reached the station, I collapsed into a chair, pulling out my phone to call for backup. As I waited, I scrolled through the pictures I had taken, my hands shaking the carcass of the deer, the dismembered foxes, the creature, Joseph Langley's body. Everything was there. Undeniable proof of what I had seen. When the other rangers arrived, I led them back to the clearing. They didn't question me or doubt my story because there it all was, just as I had left it. The creature's body lying twisted in the dirt. The remains of Joseph Langley beside it. I don't know what that creature was or where it came from, some ancient malevolent entity that had been stalking these woods for who knows how long. But I know this. It's dead now. And as we loaded its body onto the truck, I felt a strange sense of finality, as if a chapter had closed on something dark and primal. Now others will take care of the cleanup, and there will be questions, of course. Investigations into what exactly this thing was and how it had remained hidden for so long. But as for me, I'm just relieved it's over. The forest is quiet again, and I hope it stays that way. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the memory of that encounter. The image of the creature, the sound it made, the way it looked at me, it all replayed in my mind on an endless loop. I tried to lose myself in the routine of my work, but every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves had me whipping around, expecting to see those long, gnarled limbs reaching out from the shadows. I started looking into the history of the park, digging through old records and newspaper clippings. I found stories of hikers who had gone missing over the years, their disappearances unsolved and largely forgotten. There were also tales whispered among the locals of something in the woods, something ancient and not quite human. They called it different names: the Wendigo, the Skinwalker, the Goatman, but the descriptions were always the same: a creature that walked on two legs, but wasn't a man with a hunger for human flesh. I don't know if what I encountered was one of these legendary beasts or something else entirely. All I know is that it was real and it was deadly, and if there are more of them out there hidden in the depths of the wilderness, then God help anyone who crosses their path. It's been a month since that fateful day in the woods. The official story is that Joseph Langley was killed by a bear, a rogue male that had been causing problems in the area. The creature's body was sent off to some government facility for analysis, and I haven't heard a word about it since. Life has returned to a semblance of normalcy, but I knew I'd never look at the forest the same way again. I still walk the trails and check the boundary markers, but now I do it with a heightened sense of awareness, always listening for the sound of something moving through the underbrush. Always watching for a flash of two long limbs in the periphery of my vision. I've started carrying a different rifle with me on my patrols, one with more stopping power. I practice with it on my days off, honing my aim, preparing for the possibility that I might need to use it again. Because while I hoped that the creature I killed was the only one of its kind, I can't be sure. And if there are more out there, I need to be ready. The experience has changed me in other ways too. I find myself valuing my solitude more than ever, finding comfort in the stillness of the forest. But at the same time, I feel a newfound sense of responsibility, a duty to protect this wilderness and those who venture into it. I've started leaving warnings at the trailheads, subtle signs that only those who know what to look for would understand. A certain arrangement of rocks, a marking on a tree, small things that might make the difference between life and death for some unsuspecting hiker. Because that's the thing about the wilderness. It's beautiful, but it's also unforgiving. And there are things out there, things that we're not meant to understand, things that have been around long before we came along and will be here long after we're gone. All we can do is respect the power of nature and be prepared for the day when we might have to face that power head on. That's the lesson I've taken from all of this, that in the end, we're all just visitors in this wild, untamed world. And I might forget that fact at our peril. So I keep walking these trails, I'll keep listening to the whispers in the wind. Because out here on the edge of civilization, that's all we have. Our wits, our skills, and the hope that when we stare into the abyss, we'll have the strength to stare back. It's the code of the ranger, and it's one I'll live by for as long as I'm out here, standing between the wilderness and the world beyond. My name's Hank Dryden, and I've been a park ranger for as long as I can remember. I grew up in the Midwest, smack in the middle of nowhere, on a farm that barely scraped by. My old man had a way of fixing things that shouldn't have been fixable, and he passed that down to me, though I traded tractors and plows for trails and wildlife. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, predictable until yesterday. The Darby Creek Preserve, where I've worked for the last decade, is one of those places you probably wouldn't know existed unless you were lost or had a fondness for the kinds of dense, untamed woods that make you question your choices. It's a sprawling area full of gnarled trees, ancient oaks, and a creek that snakes through like it's forgotten its way out. But many people visit, which is fine by me. Fewer people means fewer problems, or at least that's what I used to think. Yesterday started like any other day. I was doing my rounds, checking on the usual spots where teenagers sneak off to smoke weed and making sure no one had decided to go camping without a permit. It was quiet, eerily so. The only sounds were the rustling leaves and the distant calling of crows, but that wasn't out of the ordinary. The place has always had a sort of uneasy calm to it. A heaviness hangs in the air here, like the weight of centuries pressing down on you. The trees seem to watch your every move, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers, ready to snatch you up if you stray too far from the path. I have always felt it, a sense of something ancient and unknowable lurking just beyond the periphery of my vision. And I chalked it up to an overactive imagination, the result of too many late nights spent reading old folk tales and legends that seemed to cling to these woods like Spanish moss. I remember my grandfather telling me stories about the creatures said to roam these parts back in the early days of settlers. Things that walked upright like men, but had faces of beasts with razor-sharp claws and an insatiable hunger for human flesh. He'd lean in close by the fire, casting shadows across his weathered face, and whisper about the disappearances, old bodies found at the edge of town, livestock eviscerated in their pens. There's things in these woods, he'd say, his voice low and grave. Things that don't rightly belong in this world. I'd always laughed it off, dismissing it as the ramblings of a superstitious old man. But as I walked through the preserve yesterday, those stories didn't seem quite so far-fetched anymore. The air felt different, charged with a kind of electric menace that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Even the wildlife seemed on edge, the usual chirping of birds replaced by an eerie silence almost deafening. It wasn't until I reached the northern edge of the preserve, where the creek bends and disappears into a dense thicket, that I noticed something was truly amiss. There was an odor in the air, something rancid and foul like rotting meat left out in the sun too long. It smelled dead animals before it comes with the territory when you work in the woods. But this was different, heavier, more pungent, the kind of stench that seeps into your pores and clings to the back of your throat. I made my way through the brush, pushing past branches that seemed to claw at my arms and face as if trying to hold me back to ward me off. But I pressed on, driven by a morbid curiosity that overrode my better judgment. And that's when I found it, the source of that ungodly smell. A deer lay on the ground, its body mangled and torn and trails strewn across the forest floor like some macabre work of art. I've seen my fair share of animal kills, the handiwork of bears, mountain lions, and coyotes, but this was different. The deer wasn't just killed, it was eviscerated, ripped apart with a savage ferocity that seemed to go beyond mere predation. It was as if the creature, whatever it was, had taken pleasure in the act, reveling in the sheer brutality of it all. I should have turned back then, reported my grim findings, and let someone else handle the investigation, but something compelled me to press on, to follow the trail of blood and viscera that led deeper into the woods. And so, with a growing sense of unease, I ventured into the heart of darkness, unaware of the horrors that awaited me. Every step I took only made that putrid smell grow stronger, more oppressive, until it was almost a physical presence wrapping around me like a noxious shroud. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees pressed closer, their branches intertwining overhead to block out the sun. The only light came from the dappled shadows that played across the forest floor, casting strange shifting patterns that seemed to dance and writhe with a life of their own. After what felt like an eternity, the trail led me to a small clearing I had never seen before, which was strange in itself, given that I thought I knew every inch of this preserve like the back of my hand. The ground here was different. It was softer, as if it had been recently disturbed. Leaves and twigs had been scraped away, revealing the dark, rich soil beneath. I knelt down to take a closer look, brushing aside the detritus with a growing sense of trepidation. And that's when I saw it, a flash of white amidst the earth, the unmistakable curve of bone. With shaking hands, I dug deeper, unearthing more fragments, shards of what could only be human remains. A femur, a piece of a shattered skull, ribs snapped like dry kindling. And there, snagged on a jagged edge of bone, was a scrap of fabric, a torn piece of a denim jacket stained rust brown with old blood. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me reeling with a sickening mixture of horror and disbelief. This wasn't just an animal kill, it was a murder, a brutal slaughter that had been concealed in the depths of the woods. Questions raced through my mind, each one more disturbing than the last. How was this poor soul? How long had they been here? Their remains left to molder in this forgotten corner of the preserve. And most chilling of all, what had done this to them? I staggered to my feet, my mind spinning with the implications of what I discovered. I needed to report this and get help to bring in the authorities. But as I turned to leave, a sound stopped me dead in my tracks, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very earth itself. It was a sound I'd never heard before, not in all my years in the woods. A sound that spoke of hunger, of malice, of an ancient primal fury that had no place in the natural world. And then I saw it. It emerged from the shadows at the edge of the clearing, a nightmare made flesh, a thing that defied all reason and sanity. It was massive, easily 9 feet tall when it reared up on its hind legs. Its body was covered in a matted, oily fur that seemed to absorb the light. Its limbs were too long, too jointed, ending in hands that were almost human, save for the wickedly curved claws that tipped each finger. But it was the face that truly haunted me, one that would forever be seared into my memory. It was elongated, almost lupine, with a snout filled with jagged, uneven teeth that seemed too large for its mouth. And where there should have been eyes, there were only empty sockets, twin voids that seemed to pull at my very soul. It let out another growl, the sound that reverberated through my bones. I knew with a certainty that bordered on madness that this abomination, was responsible for the grisly scene before me. It had killed that poor soul, had torn them apart with a savagery that defied comprehension, and now it had set its sights on me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee from this monstrosity that had no place in the natural order of things. But my body remained frozen, paralyzed by a fear that went beyond mere terror. It was a primal, visceral dread, the kind that reaches into the deepest, most primitive parts of the human psyche and takes hold with an iron grip. The creature took a step forward. Its movements were unnaturally fluid, almost graceful in their grotesquerie. I could see the muscles rippling beneath its hide, the coiled power in every sinew and tendon. It was a predator, a thing born to hunt, to kill, to rend and tear until nothing remained. And then, with a speed that belied its size, it lunged. One moment it was at the edge of the clearing, the next it was bearing down on me, a mass of teeth and claws and fury. I threw myself to the side more out of blind instinct than any conscious thought, feeling the rush of air as its talons sliced through the space where I'd been standing a heartbeat before. I hit the ground hard, the impact driving the breath from my lungs. But I didn't have time to feel the pain. The creature was on me again in an instant, its jaws snapping inches from my face, the fetid stench of its breath washing over me in a wave of nausea. I lashed out with my fists, my boots, anything I could use as a weapon, but it was like hitting a brick wall. The thing didn't even seem to feel it. Somehow, through a haze of terror and adrenaline, I managed to get my feet under me, wrench myself away from the creature's grasp, and then I ran like I'd never run before, crashing through the underbrush with a wild abandon that bordered on madness. Branches whipped at my face, thorns tore at my clothes, but I didn't feel it. All I could feel was the thudding of my heart, the burning in my lungs, and the overwhelming, all-consuming need to get away. Behind me, I could hear the creature giving chase, its heavy tread shaking the earth, the snap and crack of trees and bushes being trampled underfoot. It was gaining on me. I knew that with a bone-deep certainty. It was only a matter of time before it caught me, before those claws found my flesh and those teeth sank into my throat. But then, a miracle. The sound of running water, the burble and rush of the creek that wound its way through the heart of the preserve. Without thinking, I veered towards it, crashing through the last of the underbrush and throwing myself into its cold embrace. The shock of the water was like a slap in the face, a jolt that brought me back to some semblance of sanity. I gasped, spluttered, fought against the current that sought to drag me under. Behind me on the bank, I heard the creature skid to a halt. Heard its frustrated growl as it paced back and forth as if the water presented some impassable barrier. I didn't question. It tumbled with that particular gift horse in the mouth. I just swam, letting the current carry me downstream, away from the horror that lurked in the woods. It was only when I was sure I was out of its reach that I dragged myself onto the opposite bank, collapsing in a sodden, shivering heap. And there I lay for minutes or hours, I couldn't tell. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. And still I didn't move. I was exhausted, drained in body and mind, the events of the day playing over and over in my head like some nightmarish film reel. But I knew I couldn't stay there forever. I had to get back, had to warn the others, to tell them what I'd seen. And so, with a groan that seemed to come from my very bones, I hauled myself to my feet and began the long, painful trek back to the ranger station. By the time I stumbled through the door of the ranger station, I was a wreck. My clothes were torn and muddy, my skin scraped and bruised, and my hair a wild tangle of leaves and twigs. I looked like I'd been dragged through hell and back, and in a way, I suppose I had. Marv, my supervisor, was there, kicked back in his chair with his feet up on the desk, working on a crossword puzzle. He looked up as I entered, his eyes widening in shock at my appearance. "Jesus," he said, rising to his feet. "What happened to you? You look like you'd been through the ringer." I opened my mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. It was as if my brain had short-circuited, unable to process the sheer enormity of what I'd experienced. I just stood there shaking my head, opening and closing it like a fish out of water. Marv came around the desk, his hands held out in a placating gesture as if he were approaching a wild animal. "Take it easy, Hank," he said, his voice low and soothing. "Just sit down and catch your breath. We'll sort this out." He guided me to a chair, pushing me down gently, and I collapsed into it, my legs folding under me like wet cardboard. Marv knelt down beside me, his face creased with concern. "Now tell me what happened," he said. "From the beginning." And so I did. The words poured out of me in a torrent, a jumbled, frantic account of the horrors I'd witnessed, the mutilated deer, the human remains, the creature that had chased me through the woods. I told him everything, my voice shaking, my hands clenched into fists so tight that my nails bit into my palms. When I was done, Marv sat back on his heels. His expression was unreadable. For a long moment he didn't say anything, just stared at me with those piercing blue eyes of his. And then slowly he shook his head. "Hank," he said. There was a note of pity in his voice that made my blood run cold. "I know you've been under a lot of stress lately with the long hours and budget cuts and all, but this isn't healthy." I stared at him uncomprehending. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "I'm telling you the truth, Marv. There's something out there that's killing people. We have to do something about it." But Marv just shook his head again, a sad little smile played across his lips. "Hank, you know as well as I do that there's nothing out there but deer and coyotes and the occasional black bear. Whatever you think you saw, it was just your mind playing tricks on you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Marv, of all people, should have believed me. He'd been working these woods longer than I had. He'd seen his share of strange and unexplained things over the years. And yet, here he was, dismissing my story as the ravings of a madman. "I'm not crazy," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I'm not imagining things. There's a monster out there, Marv, a real honest-to-God monster. And if I don't do something about it, more people are gonna die." Marv sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, Hank," he said, "I know you believe what you're saying, but I can't just go off half-cocked on the word of one ranger, especially one who's clearly been through some kind of trauma. I need proof, hard evidence, before I can even think about mounting a search or calling in outside help." I stared at him, a cold fury rising up in my chest. "Fine," I said, pushing myself to my feet. "If you won't help me, I'll find someone who will. But mark my words, Marv. If that thing kills again, it'll be on your head." With that, I stormed out of the station, slamming the door behind me hard enough to rattle the windows. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but all one thing for certain, I wasn't going to let that creature claim another victim. Not on my watch. Chapter 5. I spent the next few days in a frenzy of activity driven by a sense of urgency that bordered on obsession. I combed through old newspaper archives looking for any mention of strange disappearances or animal attacks in the area. I talked to the old-timers in town, those who lived here all their lives, trying to glean any scrap of information that might help me understand what I was up against. And slowly, piece by piece, a picture began to emerge. There had been other incidents over the years, other unexplained deaths and disappearances that had been chalked up to animal attacks or accidents, a hiker who vanished without a trace, his body never found, a group of campers who'd been torn apart in their tents, their remains scattered across a blood-soaked clearing, a local farmer who'd been found dead in his fields, his body mauled beyond recognition. I spent the next few days in a frenzy of activity driven by a sense of urgency that bordered on obsession. I combed through old newspaper archives looking for any mention of strange disappearances or animal attacks in the area. I talked to the old-timers in town, the ones who lived here all their lives, trying to glean any scrap of information that might help me understand what I was up against. and slowly, piece by piece, a picture began to emerge. There had been other incidents over the years, other unexplained deaths and disappearances that had been chalked up to animal attacks or accidents. A hiker who vanished without a trace, his body never found. A group of campers who'd been torn apart in their tents, their remains scattered across a blood-soaked clearing. A local farmer who'd been found dead in his fields, his body mauled beyond recognition. As I dug deeper, a disturbing pattern became apparent. These incidents seemed to occur in cycles, with long periods of quiet punctuated by sudden brutal outbursts of violence. And always, they were centered around the Darby Creek Preserve. It was as if the creature, whatever it was tied to the land itself, as much a part of it as the trees and the soil. Perhaps it had always been there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Or maybe it was something that had been drawn to the area, attracted by some dark primal force that defied explanation. But as I pieced together the clues, another realization began to dawn on me. The creature, as terrible as it was not the only threat that lurked in the woods. There were other forces at work, human forces that had their own reasons for wanting to keep the truth hidden. I started to notice things, little discrepancies that didn't add up, reports that had been altered or redacted, witnesses who had been silenced or discredited. It's as if someone or something was actively working to cover up the creature's existence, to keep its reign of terror a secret from the outside world. And the more I dug, the more I began to suspect that this conspiracy went deeper than I could have ever imagined. There were whispers of secret societies, of ancient pacts and dark rituals of a cult that worshipped the creature as a god that offered up sacrifices to appease its insatiable hunger. I knew I was getting close to the truth, but I also knew that I was putting myself in terrible danger. The forces that protected the creature would stop at nothing to keep their secrets safe. And I was just one man, alone and outmatched. I couldn't turn back, not now. I owed it to the victims, to the families who had lost loved ones, to the creature's savagery. I owed it to myself, to the oath I had taken when I first became a ranger, to protect and serve the land and all who dwelt within it. And so, armed with the knowledge I had gathered and a grim determination that burned in my guts, I set out to confront the creature once and for all. I knew it would be waiting for me there, in the heart of the woods, in the place where it had made its lair. I won't lie, I wasn't afraid. I was terrified, more scared than I had ever been in my life, but I also knew that I had no choice. This was my fight, my destiny, and I would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. As I stepped into the clearing where I had first encountered the creature, I could feel its presence, sense its hunger and rage. It was there waiting for me, its eyes glinting in the shadows, its claws flexing in anticipation. Then it emerged, a nightmare made flesh, tooth and claw and fury. It lunged at me, its jaws snapping, talons tearing at my flesh. But I was ready for it. This time armed with a weapon of my own making, a blade forged from cold iron and imbued with the power of the land itself. When fought, the creature and I, in a desperate bloody battle that seemed to stretch on forever. I was battered and bruised, my body pushed to the very limits of its endurance, but I would not yield, I would not surrender to the creature's savagery. And in the end, through some miracle of fate or fortune, I emerged victorious. The creature lay dead at my feet, its body broken and twisted, its power forever broken. But even as I stood there gasping for breath, my body aching with 1,000 wounds, I knew that my work was not yet done. The conspiracy that had protected the creature still remained, its tendrils reaching deep into the very fabric of the town itself. I would have to root them out one by one until the truth was finally brought to light. It would be a long and difficult road, fraught with danger and deception, but I was ready for it, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For I am Hank Dryden, park ranger and guardian of the Darby Creek Preserve, and I will not rest until the land and its people are safe once more, until the shadows that have haunted these woods for so long are finally banished to the depths from whence they came. My name is Hank Dryden, and I've been a park ranger for as long as I can remember. I grew up in the Midwest, smack in the middle of nowhere on a farm that barely scraped by. My old man had a way of fixing things that shouldn't have been fixable, and he passed that down to me, though I traded tractors and plows for trails and wildlife. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, predictable. Until yesterday. The Derby Creek Preserve, where I've worked for the last decade, is one of those places you probably wouldn't know existed unless you were lost or had a fondness for the kinds of dense, untamed woods that make you question your choices. It's a sprawling area full of gnarled trees, ancient oaks, and a creek that snakes through like it's forgotten its way out. Not many people visit, which is fine by me. Fewer people means fewer problems, or at least that's what I used to think. Yesterday started like any other day. I was doing my rounds, checking on the usual spots where teenagers sneak off to smoke weed and making sure no one had decided to go camping without a permit. It was quiet, eerily so. The only sounds were the rustling leaves and the distant calling of crows, but that wasn't out of the ordinary. The place has always had a sort of uneasy calm to it. It wasn't until I reached the northern edge of the preserve, where the creek bends and disappears into a dense thicket, that I noticed something was off. There was a smell in the air, something foul, like rotting meat left out in the sun too long. I'd smelled dead animals before, sure, but this was different. Heavier, like whatever was causing. It was big, real big. I made my way through the brush, pushing past branches that seemed to claw at my arms until I found the source. A deer, or what was left of it, lay sprawled on the ground, its torso torn open, entrails strewn across the forest floor. I've seen predators take down deer before, but this wasn't like any kill I'd seen. The deer wasn't eaten, just destroyed, like something had ripped it apart for fun. I should have turned back right then, reported the incident. Let someone else handle it, but I didn't. Curiosity got the better of me, like it always does. I decided to follow the blood trail, a clear path of crimson leading deeper into the woods. Every step I took, that smell got worse, thicker, almost tangible in the still air. After about half a mile, the trail led me to a small clearing. I'd never seen before, which was strange in itself because I knew this park like the back of my hand. The ground here was different, softer, like it had been recently disturbed. I knelt down to inspect it, brushing aside leaves and dirt, and that's when I saw it. There, half buried in the earth, was a bone, a human bone, partially covered by a shredded piece of what looked like a denim jacket. I felt my stomach drop. I wasn't looking at an animal kill anymore. This was something else, something worse. I dug a little more, my fingers trembling as I pulled at the loose soil. More bones, a skull shattered in places like it had been crushed. This wasn't just a body, it was a massacre. I stood up, the weight of what I'd found pressing down on me, and that's when I heard it. A faint sound at first, like something dragging across the ground. It was coming from the other side of the clearing. Slowly, I turned my eyes, scanning the tree line, but there was nothing there, just the trees swaying gently in the breeze. But the sound didn't stop. It was getting closer, slithering through the underbrush like a snake. Then I saw it. It emerged from the shadows like a nightmare, something I couldn't have imagined even in my worst dreams. The creature was massive, easily 9 feet tall when it stood on its hind legs, covered in matted oily fur that clung to its frame like a wet blanket. Its face was elongated, more wolf-like than anything else, with a snout filled with jagged, uneven teeth that seemed too large for its mouth. But it wasn't a wolf, not by a long shot. Its limbs were too long, ending in hands, actual hands, with fingers that were too thin, too long, ending in claws that looked like they could tear through steel. But the eyes, or rather the lack of them, were the worst. There should have been eyes, they were just empty sockets, dark and hollow like pits leading to nowhere. Yet somehow I knew it could see me, feel me, even like it was probing my very thoughts. It let out a sound, not a roar, but more like a deep rumbling exhale, and I knew it was sizing me up, deciding if I was worth its time. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like they were made of lead, frozen in place as I watched this thing, this impossibility, step closer. And then it lunged. It moved faster than anything that size should have been able to, covering the distance between us in a heartbeat. I didn't think, didn't have time to. I just reacted, throwing myself to the side as its claws swiped through the air where I'd been standing a moment before. I hit the ground hard. The wind knocked out of me, but I didn't have time to feel pain. The creature was already on me again, its jaws snapping inches from my face as I rolled out of the way. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline coursing through my veins, and ran. I didn't look back, didn't dare, because I knew if I did I'd see those hollow sockets and I couldn't bear that. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, crashing through the underbrush, not caring about the branches that tore at my skin or the roots that threatened to trip me. I could hear it behind me, crashing through the trees, its breath hot on my neck. Somehow I made it to the creek, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest. I plunged into the water without thinking, letting the cold shock me back into some semblance of sanity. The creek wasn't deep, but it was wide, and I fought the current as it threatened to pull me downstream. I could hear the creature on the other side pacing along the bank, its claws scraping against the rocks, but it didn't follow me into the water. Maybe it couldn't, or maybe it just didn't want to. Either way, I didn't care. I just kept moving until I reached the other side, dragging myself onto the muddy shore. I lay there for what felt like hours, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my chest. The forest was silent again, that eerie calm returning as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something had happened, something terrible, and it wasn't over. When I finally made it back to the ranger station, I must have looked like I'd been through hell. My uniform was torn, my face scratched, and I was covered in mud. But I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to report what I'd seen to get someone out there to deal with it. I burst into the office, startling Marv, my supervisor, who was dozing off at his desk. "What the hell happened to you, Hank?" he asked, eyes wide with concern. I tried to explain, to tell him about the creature, the bones, but the words wouldn't come out right. I was rambling, incoherent, my mind still reeling from the shock of it all. Marv stood up, placing a hand on my shoulder, trying to calm me down. "Slow down, Hank, you're not making any sense." "What creature? What bone?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus, to speak clearly. "There's something out there, Marv. Something wrong. I found the body, human, and this thing. It's not natural." Marv looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "Are you sure, Hank? You know how the woods can play tricks on you, especially if you're out there alone for too long." "I'm sure, Marv. I know what I saw." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, well, go check it out first thing in the morning. But for now, you need to rest. You're exhausted, Hank. Go on, get some sleep, and we'll deal with this tomorrow." I wanted to argue, to insist that we go now, but I was too tired, too drained, so I agreed reluctantly and headed home. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing, felt its presence, and I knew that whatever it was still out there. Morning came too soon, and I was back at the station before dawn, waiting for Marv and the others. They were skeptical, but they humored me, probably thinking I'd just seen a bear or maybe a rabid wolf. While we reached the clearing, their expressions changed. The bones were still there, just as I'd left them, and the smell was undeniable. Rory's face went pale as he knelt beside the remains, the reality of it sinking in. "Jesus, Hank, you weren't kidding," he said. His voice strained. "I told you," I said, my own voice hollow. "And there's more." I don't know what that thing is, but it's dangerous and it's still out there. Marv stood up, his expression grim. We need to report this. We need to get some experts out here. Whatever this is, it's beyond us. We made our way back to the station in silence, the weight of what we found hanging over us like a dark cloud. But as we reached the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. That somewhere out there in those woods, that thing was waiting. When the police arrived later that day, they cordoned off the area and began their investigation. They found the body, the bones, just as I described. They even brought in a team of wildlife experts, but none of them could explain what had happened. The official report listed the cause of death as animal attack, but I knew better. And so did Marv. I'm not sure what comes next. Maybe they'll close the park, maybe not, but one thing's for sure, I'm never going back to that clearing, and whatever that thing was, it's still out there. In the days that followed, I tried to go about my duties as usual, but it was hard. Every rustle in the leaves, every snap of a twig had me on edge. I caught myself looking over my shoulder, constantly expecting to see those empty, hollow eyes staring back at me. Marv could see the change in me. He'd been in this job long enough to know the toll it could take. He tried to get me to take some time off, but I refused. I needed to stay busy, needed to keep my mind occupied. If I stopped even for a moment, I knew I'd be right back in that clearing face to face with that thing. But as much as I tried to ignore it, the incident had sparked something in the town. Rumors began to spread whispers of a monster in the woods. Some folks even claimed to have seen it, describing the same long limbs, the same hollow eyes that haunted my dreams. The park became a different place. The usual hikers and campers stayed away, replaced by thrill seekers and monster hunters. They came with cameras and traps, determined to catch a glimpse of the creature. I wanted to tell them to stay away, to warn them of the danger, but I knew they wouldn't listen. They were too caught up in the legend, too blind to the reality of what was out there. And then it happened again. Another body was found, this time by a group of college kids camping near the southern edge of the preserve. It was just like the first, torn apart and left to rot. The police chalked it up to another animal attack, but I knew better. It was back. The pressure was mounting. The town was in a panic, demanding answers, demanding action. But what could we do? This thing, whatever it was, wasn't like anything we dealt with before. It was cunning, elusive, and utterly terrifyingly lethal. I spent my nights poring over old books and maps, trying to find some clues, some explanation for what was happening. I delved into the history of the area, the stories and legends passed down through generations, and that's when I found it. There was a tale buried deep in the town's folklore of a creature that stalked the woods. They called it the Hollow Man, a being of shadow and hunger that preyed on the lost and the alone. It was said to be a spirit of the forest, a manifestation of nature's cruelty, and it had been here before. The stories spoke of disappearances, of bodies found mutilated in the depths of the woods. They spoke of a terror that lurked in the darkness, waiting for its moment to strike. And they spoke of a cycle, a pattern that repeated every few decades, like clockwork. I knew then that we were dealing with something ancient, something that had been a part of this land long before we ever set foot here. And I knew that if we didn't find a way to stop it, it would keep killing, keep feeding until there was nothing left. I brought my findings to Marv, to the police, to anyone who would listen, but they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to believe that there was something out there that they couldn't explain, couldn't control. They clung to their rational explanations, their animal attacks and their accidents, because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. But I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't sit by and watch as more people died, as more families were torn apart. I had to do something, even if I had to do it alone. I started spending more time in the woods tracking the creature, trying to understand its patterns. I set up cameras, laid traps, anything to get a glimpse of it. And sometimes in the dead of night, I swear I could feel it watching me, could hear its breath in the darkness. But it was always one step ahead, always just out of reach. It was like it knew what I was doing, like it could sense my intentions. And the more I chased it, the more I began to wonder if I was the one being hunted. It all came to a head one night, deep in the heart of the preserve. I was following a trail, a series of footprints that seemed to appear and disappear at random. I knew I was close, could feel it in my bones. And now I heard it, the same low rumble that had frozen me in place all those weeks ago. I turned slowly, and there it was, the hollow man standing not 10 feet away, its empty eyes fixed on me. I don't know what I expected to happen, but it wasn't what did. The creature didn't attack or lunge for my throat like it had before. Instead, it just stood there watching me like it was waiting for something. And then I understood. This wasn't just a mindless beast, a slave to its hunger. There was an intelligence there, a cruel ancient wisdom that I could feel boring into my soul. In that moment, I knew I was outmatched. I knew that, no matter what I did or how hard I fought, I could never win. This thing was beyond me, beyond anything I could comprehend. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off it. And then I ran. Ran like I had that first day, ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. And when I finally collapsed, gasping for air, I knew that I had to leave. I had to get as far away from this place as I could. The next day, I handed in my resignation. Marv tried to talk me out of it, trying to convince me to stay, but I couldn't. I couldn't spend another day in those woods or risk another encounter with that thing. I left Darby Creek that afternoon and never looked back. But sometimes in the quiet moments, I can still feel it, that presence, that ancient, hungry gaze. And I know that wherever I go, whatever I do, it will always be there, waiting in the darkness, a reminder of the terror that lurks just beyond the edge of our understanding. The Hollow Man is still out there, still stalking the depths of Darby Creek Preserve. And God help anyone who crosses its path. Because once it sets its sights on you, once it marks you as its prey, there's no escape. Only the hunt and the inevitable, inescapable end. But maybe that's the lesson in all of this. Maybe some things are better left unknown, better left to the shadows and the night. Maybe sometimes the only way to survive is to accept our own insignificance in the face of the vast, uncaring wilderness. Or maybe I'm just a fool, a man broken by a glimpse of something he was never meant to see. Either way, I'll carry the scars of Darby Creek with me for the rest of my days, and I'll always wonder, always fear, what other horrors might be lurking out there just beyond the reach of the light. The crisp October air nipped at my cheeks as I stepped out of our SUV, stretching my legs after the long drive. Mount Shasta loomed before us, its jagged peaks bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Julian Carter, 29 years old, and I thought I knew this mountain like the back of my hand. I've hiked its trails countless times, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. My fiancé, Liam, parked our vehicle near the trailhead where our friends were waiting. Jordan, my best friend since high school, was practically bouncing with excitement, his hiking boots crunching against the gravel. At 30, he was still as lanky and mischievous as ever, with a grin that usually meant trouble was brewing. Beside him stood Kelsey, a friend of Jordan's I barely knew. She was around my age, with bright eyes and an air of calm that I found reassuring. As I introduced Liam, she offered a quick smile, and he nodded politely in return. At 31, Liam was the kind of person you wanted with you on a trip like this. Steady and cautious, though perhaps a bit too much for Jordan's taste. This place is incredible, Jordan said, spinning in a slow circle. You know, people say Mount Shasta is a vortex for supernatural energy. We might see something cool or just enjoy the scenery. Liam replied, pulling his pack from the car. Jordan smirked. Don't worry, Mr. Logic. I brought a spirit board just in case. I groaned. Jordan, no. We talked about this. Leave that nonsense in the car. Relax, Anna. It's just for fun. As we began our ascent, the familiar excitement of a new adventure coursed through my veins. The trail was steep but manageable, and the views were nothing short of spectacular. The changing leaves painted the landscape in vibrant hues of red, orange, and gold. The air grew thinner as we climbed, but the exertion felt good, cleansing almost. We chatted as we hiked, catching up on each other's lives. Jordan regaled us with tales of his latest misadventures, while Kelsey shared insights from her work as a botanist. Liam, ever the practical one, kept an eye on our pace and time, ensuring we'd reach our first campsite before nightfall. As the day wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The forest seemed quieter than usual, with birds less vocal. I chalked it up to the changing seasons, but a nagging doubt lingered at the back of my mind. We reached our first campsite near Castle Lake just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The lake was a serene body of water surrounded by dense forest that surfaced like a mirror reflecting the fading light. We quickly set up camp, pitching our tents and gathering firewood. As night fell, we sat around the campfire sharing stories and toasting marshmallow. Even Liam seemed to relax, his usual worries melting away in the warmth of good company and the crackling flames. Jordan told ghost stories, his face illuminated dramatically by the firelight, while Kelsey shared legends about the mountain that she'd learned from local tribes. They say Mount Shasta is home to the Lemurian. Kelsey said, her voice low and mysterious. An ancient advanced civilization that retreated into the mountain when their continent sank into the Pacific. Jordan leaned forward, intrigued. What else do they say? Kelsey's eyes gleamed in the firelight. Some believe the mountain is a portal to other dimensions. That's why so many people report strange occurrences here, UFO sightings, mysterious disappearances, encounters with beings that aren't quite human. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and not just from the cooling night air. Come on, guys, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Let's not get carried away. We're here to enjoy nature, not chase fairy tales. Liam nodded in agreement, but I could see the seed of unease planted in his eyes. Jordan, on the other hand, was practically salivating at the thought of potential supernatural encounters. As we retired to our tents for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I told myself it was just my imagination, fueled by the spooky stories and the unfamiliar noises of the forest at night. But as I drifted off to sleep, nestled against Liam's warmth, I couldn't help but wonder what the coming days might bring. That night, I woke to the sound of faint singing. It was high-pitched and melodic, drifting through the trees like the wind, carrying a distant lullaby. My eyes snapped open and I held my breath, listening intently. The others were asleep, their breaths steady and deep. The singing faded, and I told myself it was just the wind playing tricks on my mind. I closed my eyes and willed myself back to sleep. But the haunting melody lingered in my dreams, a portent of the strangeness yet to come. Little did I know as I lay there in the darkness that our pleasant camping trip was about to take a turn into territory I never could have imagined. The mountain held secrets ancient and terrible, and we were about to stumble headlong into its mysteries. The next 2 days would test us in ways we never thought possible, pushing us to the very limits of our sanity and survival. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, I finally fell into a fitful sleep, unaware that with each passing moment, we were drawing closer to an encounter that would change our lives forever. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of frustrated muttering. Crawling out of my tent, I found Jordan inspecting his gear with a look of confusion on his face. When our poles snapped clean in half, he said, holding up the broken pieces. It's weird. I swear it was fine last night. I frowned, glancing uneasily at the tree line. The memory of the eerie singing lingered, but in the bright morning light it seemed almost laughable. We'll fix it later, I said, pushing the thought aside. We need to move if we want to reach the next site before dark. As I packed up our campsite, I noticed my compass spinning wildly. The needle refused to settle. I tapped it, shook it, but nothing helped. Then Liam's GPS started acting up, displaying error messages despite the clear sky. Kelsey frowned as she watched us fumble with our equipment. Something feels off, she said softly, her eyes scanning the surrounding forest. Jordan laughed, but it sounded forced. Probably Yana's bad vibes because I brought the spirit board. Liam shot him a glare. You're not seriously still planning to use that thing, are you? Jordan shrugged. Maybe it could be fun, right? I wanted to protest further, but something in the air made me hold my tongue. There was a heaviness to the atmosphere, a tension that hadn't been there the day before. As we set off on the trail, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The hike that day was more challenging than I remembered. The trail seemed to shift, leading us in circles, despite Liam's careful navigation. More than once we found ourselves backtracking along familiar landmarks that suddenly seemed unfamiliar. This doesn't make sense, Liam muttered, frustration evident in his voice. I've hiked this trail a dozen times, it shouldn't be this confusing. Jordan, usually the first to crack jokes, was uncharacteristically quiet. Kelsey kept close to him, her earlier calm replaced by nervous energy. I tried to keep everyone's spirits up, pointing out interesting plants or rock formations, but my forced cheerfulness felt hollow even to my own ears. As the day wore on, the forest grew denser, the trees pressing in closer. The sunlight struggled to penetrate the thick canopy, casting everything in a greenish gloom. The usual sounds of the forest, birdsong rustling leaves, the scurrying of small animals, seemed muted as if the entire mountain was holding its breath. We stopped for lunch in a small clearing, but no one had much appetite. As we sat in uneasy silence, a twig snapped in the underbrush. We all turned, startled, but there was nothing there. Probably just a squirrel, I said, trying to sound confident. Yeah, John agreed, but his eyes darted nervously around the clearing. As we packed up to continue our hike, I noticed strange markings on a nearby tree. They looked like claw marks, but larger than any animal I'd ever encountered. I opened my mouth to point them out, then thought better of it. There was no need to add to the growing unease. The afternoon dragged on, each step feeling heavier than the last. The trail became steeper and more treacherous. Roots seemed to reach out to trip us. Rocks shifted underfoot. At one point, Kelsey slipped, nearly tumbling down a steep incline before Jordan caught her arm. Thanks, she gasped, her face pale. I could have sworn that rock wasn't there a second ago. I wanted to dismiss her words as fatigue-induced paranoia, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was right. The mountain felt alive and malevolent, even as if it was actively trying to impede our progress. As the light began to fade, we finally reached our second campsite. It was deeper into the forest, more secluded than the first. The trees loomed so high above us that they seemed to block out the sky entirely. We set up camp quickly, the uneasy feeling from the day lingering like a bad taste in our mouths. That evening, as we sat around the campfire, Jordan pulled out the Ouija board. Let's just see if anyone wants to talk, he said, wiggling his eyebrows in an attempt at levity. No way, I snapped. My nerves were frayed from the day's unsettling hike. Jordan, I'm serious. This isn't funny, but Jordan was already setting it up and Kelsey didn't protest. She watched with quiet curiosity as he placed his fingers on the planchette. Is anyone here? He asked in a sing-song voice. Any spirits want to chat? The fire crackled, and a cold breeze swept through the campsite, making us all shiver. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the planchette jerked under Jordan's fingers. Waddle, he whispered, his grin fading. "Jordan stopped messing around," Liam said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm all Jordan," insisted his voice low. "It's moving on its own." We watched in horrified fascination as the planchette spelled out one word: leave. We all froze. Even Jordan looked shaken, his earlier bravado evaporating in an instant. I felt a surge of anger and fear. "That's enough," I said, grabbing the board and throwing it into the fire. The flames roared higher for a brief moment, and then everything went still, too still. The usual hum of the forest, crickets rustling leaves, distant animal calls, had vanished completely. We sat in stunned silence. The only sound was the pounding of our own hearts. Liam was the first to speak. "It's just a game," he said, but his voice trembled slightly. "It doesn't mean anything." Kelsey hugged herself, her eyes wide. "Maybe we should leave," she whispered, first thing in the morning. I wanted to agree to pack up right then and there and get off this mountain, but the thought of navigating those treacherous trails in the dark was even more terrifying than staying put. "I'll be fine," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "It's just one more night. Well, head back at first light." As we retreated to our tents, the silence of the forest pressed in around us. I lay awake for hours listening for any sound, any sign of life. But there was nothing, just the oppressive quiet and the growing certainty that we had made a terrible mistake in coming here. Little did I know, as I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, that the true horror of Mount Shasta was yet to reveal itself. The mountain had issued its warning, and we had ignored it. Now we would face the consequences of our hubris, and the night would bring terrors beyond our darkest imaginings. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and filled with unsettling dreams. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, always just out of sight. Whispers echoed in my ears, too faint to make out the words, but charged with malevolent intent. I tossed and turned, caught in a half-waking state where reality and nightmare blurred. Then, cutting through the haze of my troubled sleep, came the singing. It started softly, so faint that I thought I might be imagining it. But as I became more alert, the sound grew clearer. It was the same high-pitched melodic tune I'd heard the night before, drifting through the trees like a ghostly lullaby. This time, however, we wasn't alone. Whispers joined the melody, soft and insidious, circling our campsite like invisible predators. Their voices were neither male nor female, neither young nor old. They spoke in a language I couldn't understand, yet the malice in their tone was unmistakable. I sat up, my heart pounding so hard that I could feel it in my throat. Beside me, Liam stirred. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, clutching his arm. He nodded, his face pale in the dim light filtering through the tent fabric. "What is it?" Before I could answer, another sound joined, the eerie chorus. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, moved just beyond the firelight, circling our camp with predatory patience. "Hello," Jordan's voice called out, shaky but trying to sound brave. "What is out there?" The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness. I held my breath, both dreading and anticipating what it might reveal. The light landed on someone. A figure stood just beyond the light, motionless. It was a man, or at least it looked like one at first glance. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized that something was terribly wrong. The figure was tall and thin, with limbs that seemed too long, too jointed. Its face was obscured by shadow, but I could feel its gaze upon us, hungry and inhuman. "Hey," Jordan yelled, stepping closer despite my hissed warning. The figure tilted its head, the movement jerky and unnatural. A low, guttural growl rumbled from its chest, a sound no human throat could produce. Then it stepped forward just enough for the light to reveal its face. He'll never forget that moment. Its eyes were empty sockets, black and bottomless. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide, filled with rows of sharp, glistening teeth. It wasn't a man, it wasn't anything I could comprehend. Kelsey scream. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had held us frozen. We scrambled to our feet, grabbing whatever was closest. Flashlights, hiking poles, anything that could be used as a weapon. The creature didn't attack immediately. Instead, it began to circle the camp, always just at the edge of the light. Sometimes it would disappear into the shadows, only to reappear moments later in a different spot. It moved with a fluid grace that defied its monstrous appearance. "What is that thing?" Liam whispered, his voice tight with fear. "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, "but we need to stay together." We huddled by the rekindled fire, our backs to each other, watching the darkness. The singing had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by the creature's occasional growls and our own ragged breathing. As the night wore on, the creature's tactics changed. It began to mimic our voices, calling out to us in perfect imitations. "Anna, help me," it cried in Jordan's voice, the sound coming from the pitch-black forest. "Don't listen," I said through gritted teeth. "It's trying to lure us out, but the psychological toll was immense." We were exhausted, terrified, and the constant tension was fraying our nerves. At one point it called Liam's name in my voice so perfectly that he nearly walked into the woods before Kelsey grabbed him. "We need to leave," Kelsey whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "We can stay here at night," Liam asked, his voice shaking. "Pain will pick us off one by one." And Louis was right. The trails were treacherous enough in daylight. At night, with that thing out there, we wouldn't stand a chance. "We have to try," I said. My voice foamed despite the terror gripping me. At fast light, we pack up and make a run for it. "We stay together no matter what." The others nodded, fear and determination mingling in their eyes. We spent the rest of the night in tense silence, jumping at every sound, every shadow. The creature continued its psychological assault, mimicking our voices, scratching at trees, and occasionally letting out bone-chilling howls that seemed to shake the very air around us. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, we quickly and quietly packed our gear. The creature had been silent for the past hour, but we knew better than to assume it was gone. "Ready," I whispered, scanning the tree line one last time. With mouths of agreement, we set off down the trail, moving as fast as we dared in the dim pre-dawn light. The forest seemed to shift around us, the trees closing in on the trail, vanishing and reappearing in places it shouldn't. It was as if the very landscape was conspiring against us. We had been hiking for perhaps an hour when it happened. Jordan, who had been bringing up the rear, suddenly screamed. We turned to see him sprawled on the ground, claw marks raking across his chest. Blood soaked his shirt and his face was pale as he gasped for air. "It's here," he choked out, his eyes wide with terror. Kelsey reacted first. She grabbed a handful of salt from her cooking supplies and scattered it in a circle around Jordan. The creature appeared again just beyond the circle, its empty eyes fixed on us. It growled a sound that sent shivers down my spine. But to our amazement, it didn't cross the salt line. Kelsey said, her voice trembling, "Salt's a barrier. It's in all the old stories." Acting on instinct, we quickly expanded the circle, creating a larger safe zone around us. The creature paced at the edge, its movements becoming more agitated as the sun rose higher in the sky. "We need to keep moving," Liam said, tearing strips from his shirt to bandage Jordan's wounds. "Can you walk?" Jordan nodded weakly, gritting his teeth against the pain as we helped him to his feet. We continued our descent, maintaining a protective circle of salt around us as we moved. It was slow going, but the creature kept its distance, though we could feel its malevolent presence watching our every move. As the sun climbed higher, the oppressive atmosphere began to lift. The forest sounds returned, birds chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze. The creature's appearances became less frequent, and by midday we had lost sight of it entirely. We made it back to the trailhead just after noon, battered, exhausted, and terrified, but alive. Jordan was immediately rushed to the hospital. His wounds were deep, but miraculously not life-threatening. As we waited for news at the hospital, a local ranger approached us, his face grave. When we told him what had happened, he went pale. "People talk about skinwalkers up there," he said, his voice low. "They're not just stories. You're lucky to be alive." I didn't feel lucky. None of us did. The terror of those nights on Mount Shasta had left scars deeper than any physical wound. Even now, weeks later, I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there watching, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting hikers to wander into its domain. Mount Shasta is beautiful, but it hides a darkness I'll never forget. A darkness that has changed me, changed all of us, in ways we're still struggling to understand. And sometimes in the dead of night, I swear I can still hear that eerie, high-pitched singing calling me back to the mountain. But I won't go back. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some doors better left unopened. Mount Shasta can keep its secrets. I've seen enough to last a lifetime. The weeks following her harrowing escape from Mount Shasta passed in a blur of hospital visits, police interviews, and sleepless nights. Jordan's physical wounds healed slowly but steadily. The deep gashes across his chest would leave scars, prominent reminders of our brush with the inexplicable. With the psychological scars, those were proving far more difficult to mend. We all struggled to readjust to normal life. How do you go back to your 9-to-5 job after facing something that shouldn't exist? How do you explain to friends and family why you jump at shadows? Why the sound of wind through trees sends your heart racing? Liam threw himself into research, spending hours poring over books on folklore and supernatural phenomena. He was desperate to find some rational explanation for what we'd experienced, some framework that could make sense of the horror we'd faced. There were stories he'd say his eyes ringed with dark circles from lack of sleep. Legends from all over the world about creatures like the one we saw, skinwalkers, wendigos, fleshgates. But they're just stories, right? They have to be. I wished I could share his need for explanation. But for me, the very act of discussing what had happened was almost unbearable. I found myself avoiding the outdoors, especially at night. The darkness that I had once found peaceful now seemed filled with lurking threats. Kelsey surprisingly seemed to be coping better than the rest of us. She threw herself into studying protective rituals and charms from various cultures. Her apartment became a strange mix of botanical specimens and occult paraphernalia. Knowledge is power, she'd say when I expressed concern about her new obsession. If these things are real, we need to be prepared. Jordan, once he was released from the hospital, withdrew almost completely. He would talk about what had happened, wouldn't even acknowledge it. We stopped returning calls, canceled plans, and, according to mutual friends, rarely left his apartment. 1 month after our return, we gathered at my place for dinner. It was the first time all 4 of us had been together since the hospital, and the tension was palpable. We made awkward small talk, carefully avoiding any mention of Mount Shasta or what had transpired there. Finally, over dessert, Jordan broke the silence. "I've been having dreams," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every night I see it, that thing. It's calling me back to the mountain." We all stared at him, a chill running down my spine, because I'd been having the same dreams. I could see in the others' eyes that they had too. "It's not over," Kelsey said softly. "Whatever it is, whatever we encountered up there, it's not finished with us." "So what do we do?" Liam asked, his attempt at a laugh coming out more like a choked sob. "We can just pretend it didn't happen. We can just go on with our lives knowing what's out there." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their gazes upon me. They are looking to me for answers and leadership. I had been the one to organize the trip to push us onward when things got strange. In a way, I felt responsible for what had happened to us. We stick together, I said firmly. Whatever this is, whatever that thing wants from us, we face it as a team. We watch out for each other and prepare. If it comes for us again, well, be ready. As I spoke the words, I felt a shift in the room. The fear was still there, the trauma still raw, but there was something else. Now, too, a sense of purpose, of determination. We had survived Mount Shasta once. If we had to, we would do it again. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that our ordeal was far from over. The creature, the mountain itself, had marked us somehow. We had entered a world we didn't understand, and there was no going back. I closed my eyes, steeling myself against the nightmares I knew would come. In my dreams, I could hear the creature's call, feel the pull of the mountain, but this time I wasn't running away. This time I was preparing for a fight. Little did I know as I drifted off into uneasy sleep that our encounter on Mount Shasta was just the beginning. The true test of our strength, sanity, and bond was yet to come. The darkness we had glimpsed was spreading, and soon we would be forced to confront it once again. As weeks turned into months, life settled into a new normal, at least what passed for normal in the wake of our experience. We went through the motions of our daily routines, but the shadow of Mount Shasta loomed over everything we did. I had taken a leave of absence from my job, unable to focus on mundane tasks when my mind was constantly replaying the horrors we faced. Liam and I had postponed our wedding indefinitely. How could we celebrate when we felt like we were living on borrowed time? It was a crisp afternoon in late January when everything changed again. I was at home absently flipping through one of Liam's books on folklore when my phone buzzed with a text from Kelsey. Turn on the news now. Heart racing. I fumbled for the remote and switched on the TV. The headline made my blood run cold. Hikers missing on Mount Shasta. Search and rescue operation underway. The reporter's voice faded into background noise as my mind reeled. It was happening again. Whatever we had encountered on that mountain had found new victims. Before I could even process what I was seeing, my phone rang. It was Jordan. His voice was tight with panic. Are you watching this? Ina, we have to do something. We can't let what happened to us happen to them. I wanted to argue that it wasn't our responsibility, but deep down I knew he was right. We were perhaps the only people who understood the true danger those hikers were in. He'll call Liam and Kelsey. As I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, we'll figure out what to do. Within an hour, we were all gathered at my apartment, the news playing softly in the background as we tried to formulate a plan. We can't just go charging up the mountain, Liam said, ever the voice of reason. We barely made it out alive last time, and we were prepared for a camping trip. This is the middle of winter. We can do nothing, Jordan insisted, pacing the room like a caged animal. You saw that thing. You know what it's capable of. Most people don't stand a chance. Kelsey, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I might have something that can help. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. I'd been doing research, collecting protective charms and artifacts. This is supposed to be a powerful charm against evil spirits. We all leaned in to look as she opened the box. Inside was an assortment of items, a small silver mirror, a pouch of what looked like herbs, a vial of clear liquid, and a strange twisted piece of bone. I can't guarantee it'll work, Kelsey said softly, but it's more than we had last time. I took a deep breath, looking around at my friends. We were all scared, all carrying the scars of our last encounter. But I could see the determination in their eyes, the same stubborn courage that had gotten us off that mountain alive. Okay, I said my decision was made. We go back, but we do this smart. We contact the search and rescue team, offer our help as experienced hikers who know the area, but don't mention what we really saw up there. They'd never believe us anyway. But we stay alert. and we stayed together. The others nodded, a mix of fear and resolve on their faces. As we began to plan our return to Mount Shasta, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something much bigger than we understood. The creature we had encountered was terrifying enough, but what if it was just the tip of the iceberg? What other secrets did the mountain hold? As night fell and we finalized our preparations, a storm began to brew outside. The wind howled around the building, carrying with it the faintest echo of that high, eerie singing we had heard on the mountain. A shiver ran down my spine, and I knew the others had heard it too. We exchanged glances, no words necessary. Whatever was waiting for us on Mount Shasta, it knew we were coming. And this time we were walking into its territory willingly. As I packed my bag, checking and double-checking our supplies, I tried to quell the fear rising in my chest. We were more prepared this time, more knowledgeable about what we might face. But would it be enough? Only time would tell. As we set out the next morning, the mountain looming in the distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were embarking on a journey from which not all of us would return. The drive to Mount Shasta was tense, each of us lost in our own thoughts as the familiar landscape rolled by outside the windows. The mountain loomed ever larger on the horizon. Its snow-capped peak was shrouded in mist. It looked deceptively peaceful, beautiful even, but we knew better. We arrived at the ranger station just as the search and rescue team was gearing up for another day of searching. The lead ranger, a gruff man named Mike, eyed us suspiciously as we approached. "We're experienced hikers," I explained, sticking to our agreed-upon story. "We know these trails well, and we want to help." Mike seemed skeptical, but they were short-handed and desperate for any assistance. After a brief orientation, we were assigned to a search grid on the eastern slope, uncomfortably close to where we had our encounter months ago. As we began our ascent, the familiar terrain brought back a flood of memories. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle in the underbrush made us jump. But there was something else too, a heaviness in the air that hadn't been there before. "Do you feel that?" Kelsey whispered, her eyes darting nervously around. We all nodded. The mountain felt different, charged with an energy that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We had been searching for a couple of hours when Jordan suddenly stopped, his face pale. "Listen," he said, his voice barely audible. At first I heard nothing. Then, carried on the wind, came the faintest sound of singing. That same high, ethereal melody that had haunted our dreams for months. "It's here," Liam said, his hand tightening on his hiking pole. As if in response to his words, a scream echoed through the trees. It was human, filled with terror and pain. Without thinking, we broke into a run following the sound. We burst into a small clearing and froze. One of the missing hikers was there, a young woman. She was on her knees, her eyes wide with fear, and standing over her, its grotesque form, unmistakable even in daylight, was the creature. It turned as we entered the clearing, its eyeless gaze fixing on us. I felt a jolt of recognition pass through it, and a slow, terrible grin spread across its too wide mouth. "One!" I shouted to the hiker, "Get back to the ranger station." She scrambled to her feet and took off down the trail. The creature made no move to stop her. It was focused entirely on us. "Now what?" Jordan asked, his voice shaking. Kelsey was already reaching into her pack, pulling out the box of protective charms. "Circle up," she commanded. "Whatever happens, don't break the circle." We formed a tight circle as Kelsey quickly laid out the items from her box. The silver mirror she placed in the center, reflecting the creature's distorted form. She scattered herbs in a circle around us, then uncorked the vial of clear liquid and sprinkled it over each of us. The creature watched all this with what seemed like amusement. Then, with the speed that defied its awkward appearance, it charged. I braced for impact, but it hit an invisible barrier at the edge of our circle. It reeled back, growling in frustration and pain. "It's working," Kelsey breathed relief, evident in her voice. But our victory was short-lived. The creature began to circle us, probing for weaknesses. And as it moved, it began to change. Its form shifted and blurred, taking on aspects of things from our worst nightmares. "Don't look at it," I warned, remembering how it had used our fears against us before. "Focus on each other." We stood our ground as the creature's assaults grew more frenzied. It howled and snarled, its voice changing to mimic each of us in turn, trying to trick us into breaking the circle. I don't know how long we stood there, holding on to each other as the world seemed to go mad around us. The sky darkened, unnatural shadows creeping across the clearing. The air grew thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe. Just when I thought we couldn't hold out any longer, a new sound cut through the chaos. Voices, human voices, calling out. The search and rescue team had heard the commotion and was heading our way. The creature let out one final bone-chilling shriek, then seemed to melt into the shadows. In the blink of an eye, it was gone, leaving behind only an oppressive silence and the lingering scent of decay. We stood frozen in our protective circle, hardly daring to breathe. The voices of the search and rescue team grew louder, flashlight beams cutting through the gathering darkness. "We should break the circle," Liam whispered, his voice hoarse. But Kelsey shook her head. "Not yet. It might still be out there waiting." As the first rescuer entered the clearing, the spell seemed to break. The oppressive atmosphere lifted and the forest sounds slowly returned. Kelsey nodded and we finally stepped out of our makeshift barrier. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions and explanations. We told the rescue team about finding the lost hiker, carefully omitting any mention of the creature. They were just relieved to have found one of the missing people alive. As we made our way back down the mountain, I couldn't shake the feeling that our encounter had been too easy. The creature had retreated, yes, but it hadn't felt defeated. If anything, it seemed satisfied, as if everything had gone according to some unseen plan. Back at the ranger station, we gave our statements and prepared to leave. The rescued hiker, still shaken but recovering, approached us. "Thank you," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't know what that thing was, but you saved me from it." I opened my mouth to respond, but new words came out. How could I explain that we might have saved her from immediate danger, only to draw her into something far larger and more terrifying? As we drove away from Mount Shasta, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape, an uneasy silence filled the core. We had faced the creature again, and survived. But this didn't feel like a victory. If anything, it felt like we'd just taken our first steps into a much darker, more dangerous world. It's not ever, is it? Code moused, breaking the silence. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. "No," I replied. A sense of green determination settled over me. "I think it's only just beginning." As Mount Shasta faded in the rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were leaving something unfinished. The creature, the mountain, the ancient forces at play. They were all part of a mystery that we had only begun to unravel. And something told me that whether we wanted to or not, we would be drawn back into that mystery sooner rather than later. For now, though, we were alive. We were together, and more stronger for what we faced. Whatever came next, we would face it as a team. The darkness might be spreading, but we would stand against it, armed with our newfound knowledge and the unbreakable bond forged in the face of terror. As we drove into the night, I silently vowed that we would solve this mystery, no matter the cost. The creature may have won this round, but the war was far from over, and next time we would be ready. The weeks following our return to Mount Shasta were filled with a strange mix of relief and mounting dread. We had survived another encounter with the creature, but the experience had left us with more questions than answers. The sense that we were caught up in something far larger than we had initially imagined grew stronger with each passing day. I threw myself into research, poring over books on local legends, folklore, and unexplained phenomena. Liam joined me in this quest for knowledge, his scientific mind providing a necessary counterbalance to the more outlandish theories we encountered. Kelsey expanded her collection of protective charms and delved deeper into various spiritual practices, seeking any edge we could get against the supernatural forces we were facing. Jordan, still bearing the physical and emotional scars of our first encounter, focused on physical preparation, pushing himself to become stronger, faster, more capable of facing whatever threats might come our way. It was during one of our late-night research sessions that we stumbled upon something that would change everything. Liam had been cross-referencing historical accounts of strange occurrences around Mount Shasta with geological surveys of the area when he noticed a pattern. "Emma, look at this," he said, spreading out a series of maps on the table. "These incidents, they're not random. They're concentrated along these lines." I leaned in, studying the maps. He was right. The reported sightings of strange creatures, unexplained disappearances, and other paranormal events formed a clear pattern when laid out geographically. "Ley line." Kelsey breathed, her eyes wide. "They're following ley lines." "Ley lines?" Jordan asked, skepticism clear in his voice. "Theoretical alignments of landforms and places of ancient religious significance." I explained, my mind racing. "Some believe they channel spiritual energy, or they could be geological fault lines." Liam added, ever the scientist. "Areas of weakened rock that could produce strange phenomena due to released gases or magnetic anomalies." Whatever they were, we had stumbled upon a crucial piece of the puzzle. The creature we had encountered wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of something much larger, a network of supernatural energy that crisscrossed the landscape with Mount Shasta at its center. Our discovery led us to a small, out-of-the-way bookshop specializing in occult literature. The proprietor, an elderly woman named Esther, listened to our heavily edited version of events with a knowing look in her eyes. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she asked, her gaze piercing. "The guardian of the mountain." We exchanged glances, unsure how much to reveal, but Esther continued, her voice low and urgent. "Mount Shasta isn't just a mountain, it's a gateway. A thin place where the veil between worlds is at its weakest. The creature you encountered is one of its guardians, tasked with protecting the gateway and testing those who might be worthy to pass through. Pass through to where?" I asked. Chill running down my spine. Esther's eyes gleamed. "To the world beyond, of course, the realm of the Lemurians, the advanced civilization said to dwell within the mountain." It sounded fantastic, unbelievable, and yet, after what we had seen, could we really discount it? "Why us?" Jordan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why did it choose to reveal itself to us?" Esther studied us for a long moment before answering. "Perhaps you were chosen, or perhaps you simply stumbled into something you weren't prepared for. Either way, you're part of it now. The mountain has marked you and it won't let you go easily." As we left the bookshop, our heads spinning with this new information, I felt a shift in the air. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest echo of that now familiar singing. We all heard it, our bodies tensing instinctively. "It's calling us back," Kelsey said, her voice a mix of fear and awe. I nodded, a sense of grim determination settling over me. Then we go back. But this time we go prepared. We go with purpose. As we began to plan our return to Mount Shasta, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were approaching a point of no return. We were about to step fully into a world we'd barely understood, driven by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a growing sense of responsibility. The creature, the mountain, the gateway. They had chosen us for better or worse, and now, armed with new knowledge and a deeper understanding of what we were facing, we would meet that choice head-on. As Ned fell and we finalized our preparations, I looked at my friends Liam, Jordan, and Kelsey. We had been through so much together, faced terrors that defied explanation. And now we were choosing to walk back into the heart of that terror. "Are we really doing this?" Jordan asked, a tremor in his voice. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of our decision. We are. Whatever's waiting for us on that mountain, whatever truth we uncover, we face it together. As we set out once more from Mount Shasta, I silently hoped we were making the right choice. We were about to confront forces beyond our understanding, to peek behind the veil of reality itself. And somehow I knew that once we took that step, there would be no going back to the lives we once knew. The mountain was calling and we were answering. For better or worse, we were about to uncover the truth hidden in the shadows of Mount Shasta. And I prayed we were ready for whatever we might find. The journey back to Mount Shasta felt different this time. There was a sense of purpose, of destiny, even that hadn't been there before. We were no longer helpless victims stumbling into the unknown. We were seekers of truth, willingly stepping into the mystery that had consumed our lives as we ascended the mountain, following the ley lines we had discovered. The air grew thick with an otherworldly energy. The singing that had haunted our dreams for months now surrounded us, no longer eerie but almost welcoming. It was as if the mountain itself was guiding us to our destination. We reached a part of the mountain I had never seen before, a hidden valley shrouded in mist. At its center stood a circle of standing stones, ancient and weathered. As we approached, the mist seemed to part, revealing a shimmering distortion in the air at the center of the circle. The gateway. Kelsey breathed her eyes wide with wonder. Before we could react, the creature appeared. But it was different now. Its form was more defined, less monstrous. In the strange light of the gateway, I could almost see the noble being it might have once been. "You have returned," it said in a voice that was a mixture of growls and melodic tones. "You have proven yourselves worthy." "Worthy of what?" Liam asked, his scientific skepticism warring with the undeniable reality before us. "Of the truth," the creature replied. "Of the knowledge that lies beyond the veil." It gestured towards the shimmering gateway. "Beyond lies the realm of the Lemurians, the world within the mountain. But be warned, to step through is to leave your old lives behind. The knowledge you gain cannot be unlearned. The sights you see cannot be unseen. You stood at the precipice of a choice that would change everything. Can we dare to step through, to leave behind the world we knew for one of mystery and wonder? Or did we turn back, return to our normal lives with the burden of knowing what lay hidden in the heart of the mountain?" I looked at my friends, seeing the same conflict in their eyes. We had come so far, faced so much. Could we really turn back now? "We go together," I said, reaching out to take Liam's hand. "All of us, or none of us." One by one they nodded. Whatever lay beyond that gateway, we would face it as a team. As we stepped toward the shimmering portal, the creature spoke one last time. "Remember, the journey beyond is also a journey within. The truths you discover about the universe will be matched by truths about yourselves." With a deep breath, we stepped through the gateway. It was a moment of disorientation, a feeling of being unmade and remade in an instant. And then we stood in a vast cavern illuminated by a soft, pulsing light that seemed to come from the very walls. Before us stretched a city of impossible architecture, buildings that defied gravity and geometry, and all around us were beings of light and energy, the Lemurians in their true form. As they approached us, I felt a sense of homecoming, as if some part of me had always known this place existed. The fear and uncertainty of the past months fell away, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. We had found the truth hidden within Mount Shasta that had pierced the veil between worlds. And in doing so, we had not only uncovered the secrets of the mountain, but also discovered hidden depths within ourselves. As the Lemurians welcomed us, sharing their knowledge and showing us wonders beyond imagination, I realized our journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. We had been chosen as bridges between worlds, tasked with protecting the secrets of Mount Shasta while slowly preparing humanity for the greater truths that lay hidden just beyond the veil of ordinary reality. The creature, though the Guardian had been right, we could never go back to our old lives. As I looked at my friends, saw the wonder and determination in their eyes, I knew we would want her. We had found our true purpose, our true selves. As we delved deeper into the mysteries of the Lemurian world, I thought back to that first camping trip that had started it all. We had gone looking for a simple adventure and instead found a new reality, a new destiny. Mount Shasta had called to us, tested us, and ultimately transformed us. And as I began our new lives as guardians of its secrets, I knew the greatest adventure of all still lay ahead. The end of our old lives was just the beginning of something far greater. And whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever wonders or terrors we might face, we would face them together, forever changed by the secrets we had uncovered in the shadow of Mount Shasta.